and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I see you, Miriam. For you.
Okay. And now we will have, yes, Madam City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Yes, good morning, Mayor and everyone. Councilmember Andrews.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Lamnin.
Here.
Okay. Councilmember Marquez.
Present.
Councilmember Salinas.
Present.
Councilmember Wahab.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Cermeño.
Late, but I'm here. Thanks.
Mayor Halliday.
Here.
Thank you.
And so with that, I will open this to any public comments. Is there anyone? I don't actually at this point see any attendees at this meeting. So is there anyone who is attending who wants to make a public comment right now? With that, we will close public comments and move right into our agenda. For this morning, we are going to be discussing our strategic roadmap and getting an update and looking at, what's been accomplished, what's still to be accomplished, and what things have been accomplished that weren't on the strategic roadmap, and what we want to see going forward. So this should be a good day, and I want to thank all the members of the staff who, and our consultants who helped put this together today. I hope that we have a productive session. And with that, I'm going to turn it over first to the city manager, and she can introduce.
Great. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Happy to be here this Saturday, and looking forward to a productive day of conversation with everyone. As you remember, it's been about a year since the Council adopted the city's 3-year strategic roadmap, and really about 6 months since implementation of that roadmap began in earnest. And so today, our discussion is really going to focus on a progress update on the projects that have been occurring during the first year of the roadmap, and really a chance to reflect on lessons learned from this first year, and also then a chance for you to communicate your priorities for the coming year with staff. And I think obviously the primary theme you'll hear today from the various staff members who are going to present is that 2020 did not go to plan, as most of us found out really sort of immediately after we adopted the strategic roadmap. We sort of rapidly moved into emergency mode with the COVID-19 response. And so we've had to make a number of adjustments to the work plan and the projects to respond to COVID-19, to respond to the economic downturn and contraction, and then also to respond to the political events of 2020. And you'll hear a number of updates from staff about that. And so in preparation for this discussion today, we've had teams of staff who have met throughout the fall. They reviewed the first year of work on the roadmap, and then they made suggested updates to talk about, should there be projects that we added as a result of COVID-19 that need to be added to the work plan? Are there things that needed to get delayed because of the staff impacts because of COVID? And so there was a lot of discussion amongst the staff in preparation for today's meeting. And so there's some themes that came out of those discussions. You'll hear more about them, I think, as we go through the dialogue today, but I just wanted to highlight some of these for you to keep in mind as we have the discussion. So I think first, a lot of our staff feel very proud of the city's wide-ranging COVID-19 response, and as well as the amount of progress we've made on a lot of our priority projects in spite of some really extreme challenges that we've faced over the past year. And then I think across the board, staff are sort of experiencing extreme fatigue from the amount of rapid response, flexibility, and innovation required over the last year. And for many teams, the amount of work that was added during 2020 did not result in an equal amount of work being removed or postponed from people's workloads. And so there's a lot of staff who feel underwater and don't really see the light at the end of the tunnel, or how their workloads are going to ease up, or how they're going to get caught up on projects that they might feel behind on. And so I also want to we've talked a lot about this, that remind the council that while we have, almost 1,000 city employees, the number of staff who are really working to implement the projects in the roadmap is a fraction of that. And so you'll see that about 90% of the 210 projects in the roadmap are really being implemented by about 70 staff members on top of their day-to-day workloads. So I just want to remind the council and keep that in mind, that there's really a very small group of employees that are tasked with leading and implementing the projects in the roadmap. And so really the theme for today is going to be one of reflection and reevaluation, and then most importantly, prioritization. So we really want the council to tell us, even though we've got a number of projects on the work plan, what are the most important projects for the council? And that will really help the executive team working with their staff to help reduce overwhelm and really help them focus on implementing projects that are most important to the council. And then, where we can, it'd be great if we could identify some projects that might be lower on the priority list that could get pushed out a year or two, and really to help staff kind of reprioritize and really focus on the things that are going to be most important in the next couple of years. And so I just want to sort of set that context for the council as we go into the discussion today. I do want to thank all of you for filling out the pre-survey. It's incredibly helpful for the staff and for Jim and Christelle, who've been helping us prepare for today's retreat. And there's a lot of time, there's a lot of things to cover in today's retreat. Thankfully, we've got a few extra minutes because of the because we didn't have public comments, so that's helpful. So we'll hopefully be able to move through things, but really just we have really about a half an hour to discuss each priority. And so I think the mayor, we talked about really trying to limit the number of sort of the time for council comments, at least for the first round. And then, if there's time, maybe having a second round of comments for each priority. So we are going to move relatively quickly through that. And I just want to reassure the council that this is not going to be the last time you'll be able to talk about this. So this is the first discussion about updates. And then we're going to return in another work session in the spring to do an update. It should show an updated draft based on feedback we hear from the council today. And then hopefully we'll address how we incorporate maybe some of the additional projects that have been brought up in the surveys that you responded to. So I think those are just some general opening comments, and I see Councilmember Wahab has her hand raised. So I don't know if it's a comment for me or a question for me during about the opening context for the agenda today. And I hope everyone has the working agenda and the other items to review for today's work session.
Definitely. It was a question for you, actually.
Absolutely.
So, I went through this and I just want to be clear, just for my own purposes. A lot of the, let's say, dots 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, things like that, many of them we've either already done or in my mind is complete. So I just want to understand, one, why are they still included? Is there something that we're missing? And then number two, that let's say we have our dots, right? All of us, and you're saying we're going to put them on a totem pole as to, number one is most important. Number 7, could be done in next year or the year following. We're going to do that all in this session for each particular
priority. Correct.
Priority. Okay.
And so I think, focusing on the projects that are not complete. So obviously, or if you think that a project that you think is complete but still needs additional work from staff, you could list that as a priority. But I think really focusing on what are the priorities for those projects that are not complete.
Okay. And then,
could I just jump in quickly? Sorry to interrupt. I just want to say is that, for instance, something like the homeless strategic plan, it is underway, but it is not complete and will take a lot of ongoing implementation. So that, for instance, isn't complete. So it'd be good to know, is that a priority? Because there's going to be a lot of work to implement that plan over time. So like Kelly said, some of the things that may seem complete aren't, we still need a lot of resources to implement them. Same with the navigation center and trying to find sustainable funding for that. While we have it up and running, we still need to be working on trying to find ongoing funds. So I think just to kind of, hopefully that helps provide a little context as well.
Okay. And then I know we often talk about which staff is doing what. And I know that COVID, for example, a lot of people have to work from home, and, we've all kind of felt that in our own lives. Specifically, if we had more insight or transparency as to what does that look like for folks, because we obviously know our fire and police are dealing with a lot of the street issues with COVID and so forth. But then staff that has historically worked in, let's say, cubicles in their office space, doing whatever they need to do and working at home, what is the difference for them?
I think it's not about working from home versus working in the office, but I would say, like, for example, the housing staff. So the fact that they had to quickly implement a rent relief program in basically, a month's time, it took away from their ability to work on the other priorities of the housing division, which is getting the RFP out for, building new housing. So I think that's what we meant in terms of the impacts of COVID is like there were COVID, like the economic development staff, they went and they've been really focused on, business relieving, permitting requirements for businesses that wanted to do outdoor dining and kind of a whole outreach around that. So that really impacted their sort of pre-existing priorities and work plan.
Okay. Also, a lot of us have school-age children at home, yeah, so it is. I can speak from experience trying to work around. You'll probably see my daughter's Zoom bomb at some point today, but so I just think trying to manage that for some people, it's really hard.
Okay. And it's just because we don't have the full transparency on the day to day. So it's harder for us to and Director Ott, I know yours is probably the worst one. But some of the other priorities, if you will, it's a little harder to understand.
And I think as we come back, I think that's good feedback when we come back for some of the work sessions, as we bring this back to the council, I think maybe highlighting some of those conflicts and some of the, which staff are working on which projects and kind of how those conflicts show up,
or even per department, very high level, this was added to them, right? So let's say maintenance staff, for example, you would assume, what are they dealing with? Whether they were dealing with COVID directly, or whether some of them were out, or whatever the case may be, they were impacted because, they were not fully staffed. Just something like that as we go along, it just provides a little bit more insight for me. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think Mayor Councilmember Lamnon has her hand up as well.
You're
muted.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I read your lips correctly.
I'm a little unclear, Kelly. You want me to be handling the question?
No, that's fine. I wasn't sure because we haven't really launched into the actual agenda yet.
Well,
so.
I did see that. I just thought I did see her hand up.
I'm happy to recognize. I just didn't want to step on your toes. So.
It's all right. Councilmember Lamnon, go ahead, and I'll keep my participants up then.
Thank you both. So just wanted to build on Councilmember Wahab's comment or comments. And the other piece that I sort of struggled with in prep was also some of these things are required, either because they're legally required, like the housing element, or they're grant, things we've received grant funding for. And so I consider that also a requirement. And so being able to determine what things we really shouldn't, we really can't take off the table or off the plate is helpful to think through. And even things like our streets, we would assume we're doing these water improvements, for instance. We wanted those in the strategic plan on purpose so that we could have a full picture to think about what we're talking about. And is it realistic to do less? What are the implications of that, et cetera? So. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think we can potentially highlight that as we come back, like which are the projects that are either required or are grant funded projects. Those would be good things to just have an annotation in the sort of updated roadmap. So,
and I was just going to add one thing. Yep. Just remember, this is just a tool to help us, right? This isn't the end of the conversation. We're going to have work sessions. It's just, we're trying to get a general sense of where to prioritize. So, don't feel like it has to be perfect. Doesn't mean if you don't vote for something, something else won't get done. It just means help us it's just another tool that we can use to help make some of those judgment calls and come back with a recommendation that you can continue to discuss.
And I think, Mayor, you don't have to now we're going to turn it over to Jim and Christelle from Civic Makers. So now you're off the hook for facilitating. And
All right,
so,
thank you.
yes. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim Ritu and Crystal Blackford and let them kind of walk us through the format for today.
All right, thank you so much. We're so happy to be back. I'm Christelle Blackford with Civic Makers, and I'm here with my colleague Jim Ritu, who's front and center in this photo here, but you can probably also see somewhere on the screen. You probably remember us from the workshops we held with you to develop the strategic roadmap back in 2019, and we are honored to be back to help you revise this roadmap in light of such a challenging year. So today's goals, we will be focusing on basically the beginning will be a little bit of a review just to kind of go back over the 2019 roadmap very briefly and talk about where we've been since it was adopted. We're going to share then the results from the pre-survey that you and all of the E-team completed, and you'll also hear some updates from staff. But really the majority of the agenda is going to be spent on this middle part here, which is providing high-level guidance on the reprioritization of the projects by priority area. And you received some update about how we will be doing that, so you could do a little bit of pre-thinking about that. Moving into our agenda, Jim, who is advancing our slides. As City Manager McAdoo already mentioned, we have a lot to cover today. We might be just slightly ahead of schedule right now, but we are sure that we will use that time up for discussion. So in the gray here, you can see the each priority area where we'll be doing a 30-minute deep dive with dot voting, discussion, and before the dot voting and discussion, we'll have a brief staff presentation for each one of these priority areas. You'll see here that we have 2 short breaks. We have a 10-minute break and then a 20-minute lunch. And we will wrap up by 2 p.m., at least for this part of the agenda. And then finally, I just want to set a few ground rules. Because we have limited time together, we really just ask that everyone put aside other things and be fully present and engaged. When we get into the discussion, we want you to be mindful of making space for your colleagues, listen attentively with an open mind, pursue consensus. This is what this is about. And sometimes consensus might mean I can live with that. And we want you to also help us keep things on time. So thank you so much. We will dive right in, and I'll hand it over to my colleague, Jim Ritu.
Thank you, Christelle. So what I'd like to do today, right now, is 2 things. I want to set the stage. I want to remind people sort of where we've been with the strategic roadmap and how it relates to what we're doing today. And then also quickly go over the feedback we heard from our staff interviews and the council E-team survey to reflect that back to you. So first, on the overview of the strategic roadmap, if you remember, set your minds back to May 2019. And we were in a strategic council retreat very similar to this one. And to get the strategic roadmap flowing, I asked you if we were to teleport to Hayward in the year 2024, in your ideal but realistic version, what would you see? What would I hear? What would you feel? And you said things like, oh, it would be a community of choice for new families and employers, and we'd have new high-paying jobs, and blighted properties would be developed, and there'd be outdoor dining and inviting a regional presence, diverse families, and inclusive neighborhoods. You painted the picture. I don't remember what that felt. I'm not going to read the vision, but remember what that felt like. And then we asked you, okay, with that vision in mind, what are the critical few priorities that the city needs to work on in the next 3 to 5 years in order to make this vision a reality? And you said housing, economy, climate change, infrastructure, organizational health, and quality of life. that those are the things that are really going to make this vision come alive. And then we said, okay, for each of those priorities, what specific projects do we need to accomplish? Who's going to do it? And when is it going to happen in order to make that priority be successful, which then makes that vision successful? And we came with these cross-department committees, like people from different departments came together with their individual lists. We horse traded. We came up with what absolutely needed to be in the next 3 years, and we came up with these individual plans. And this was beautiful when we got to the end of January 2020, and I think it passed unanimously. And then COVID-19. And that sort of threw a wrench into everything, right? So staff stepped up to the plate. They're diligent. They work tirelessly, dedicated hours to rearrange all the project lists. But that's what had to happen. Like projects that were on track had to be delayed. Other projects had to be added to respond to COVID. The list got jumbled. Staff had to improvise. And when they got really good at that, in addition to a global pandemic, there was also a global push for racial equity, necessitating a refocus of the projects and the priorities again. So today you're going to hear a lot about two themes over and over again. And we might hit you over the head with them because I think Christelle and I, as we did all the feedback, we got hit over the head with them ourselves. And that's about prioritizing projects and aligning resources. And that comes not just from those two global dynamics, but it really also comes from the feedback that we heard from staff and also the feedback we heard from you all, from council and the E-team. So let me mirror what we heard so you can get the sort of a similar perspective. So we talked to three groups of staff, and the first group was the analysts. We talked to the analyst group, and the first thing they said is prioritize. We need to prioritize the projects in the strategic roadmap, but not ad hoc. They were very clear about this. Just don't pick one willy-nilly. They wanted to know the why behind why we would prioritize certain projects over other. And the second thing they said is align. Make sure you align time, money, and staff to the priorities and projects. They then sort of led into the third bullet point, which is burnout. That we needed to right-size staff duties as we're not in emergency mode anymore. That when COVID hit, everyone had to do whatever was required. And now that we've taken a little bit of a step back, is to align that sort of time, money, and staff back to the priorities so people aren't getting burned out. And then finally, they emphasized that equity and inclusion mattered just as much as COVID, that they wanted to hopefully see staff and council elevate these issues. So then we were able to eavesdrop into the managers meeting. That's the big meeting Kelly held a couple of weeks ago with all managers on Zoom. And there were 12 breakout groups. And Christelle and I and Mary and a few others, we were able to go between the different breakout groups and hear what they were saying. And again, the main message was prioritize. Don't add new projects onto the strategic roadmap unless you take something off. They also echoed this idea of COVID burnout, that there's too many assignments with too many projects without adequate staffing and funding behind them. They then turned to the lessons of COVID, which is, hey, maybe some of the projects should leverage technology like telecommuting or online services. We've learned that through COVID that that's really important, and let's consider that when we reprioritize our projects and the roadmap. And then the final thing was the iceberg analogy, that they wanted to emphasize that daily operations take most of their time and effort, even though they're not on the roadmap. And as we said, right, most of the staff's duty is below the waterline. It's the 80 or 90% of the iceberg that they do on a daily basis. It's just that 10, 15, maybe 20% that they're able to address the strategic priorities. And they wanted to sort of emphasize that they're doing a lot just to keep the daily operations going, especially during a global pandemic. And then we talked to a few of the E-team members. And again, they sort of echoed many of these things. Prioritize. If you add projects, others needs to come off. They talked about a lack of resources. That a few said, hey, he was hoping that staffing and budgeting would follow the projects that made the roadmap, but that didn't necessarily happen. One member wanted to emphasize that, hey, we're in an emergency situation here. We're teetering on disaster with our staffing levels, and it's so hard to do daily operations, let alone strategic roadmap projects. And then finally, a good point, that they appreciated the roadmap because it was bringing transparency and a shared focus, that it was really good to know what others were doing and to have a clear understanding of what council thought was important. So with that, then I want to turn to the council E-team survey and reflect back on that. And the first thing we asked you to do is, was sort of our first order question. What do you think of the vision and the priorities to begin with? Are we still in the right ballpark? And for the most part, you said yes, except for minor differences. Most people strongly agree that the vision is still accurate to this day, and the 6 priorities are still the 6 that we should be focused on. So to us, we thought, okay, that's good, right? We're still, our North Star is still the same. And then we asked you, like, well, how well do you think we've done, given COVID and other dynamics? How well have we done towards accomplishing the roadmap? And again, that was not bad either. A third of you said significant progress, a third said slight progress, a third said about good progress, which averages out to good, which during a global pandemic, I think is pretty good. And then we, council, we got a little sneaky because we asked the E-team members questions that we didn't ask council. We asked the E-team members specifically about resources. Did they have the time, money, staffing, budget to accomplish the projects in the roadmap? And the answer was, sometimes, maybe, sort of, not really. So you can see when we asked them, is my budget adequate to meet the needs of the roadmap? It's sort of lukewarm, centering around neutral. Is the timeline for projects achievable and realistic? Again, averaging around neutral. Is the amount of work added to my plate roughly the same amount of work taken off my plate? Here, we're definitely on the lower end of the spectrum, neutral to strongly disagree. And then the final one, does the roadmap help me push back on requests that didn't match the roadmap priorities? Again, agree, but all the way to strongly disagree. And again, the reason we did the roadmap to begin with was to improve some of those dynamics. And so there's probably still some room for improvement in order to get the resources better aligned with the roadmap. So that's why, if I had to sum up everything we heard from the council survey and the staff interviews, it goes back to prioritize projects and align resources. To me, that is the goal of what we're trying to do today and henceforth. One of the things that I don't want to gloss over is the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we have had a GARE team working diligently on this to recommend a solution to you all about how that integrates with the strategic roadmap. And so for that, I'm going to turn it over to the GARE team really quick to sort of summarize what they've been doing and to make a proposal.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Nicholas Mullins, and I'll be doing a quick overview of the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that we've done. Next slide, please. So the 2020 GARE cohort completed their training in December of 2020. And that's one of the achievements that we had. It's a vital piece to the city's diversity, equity, and inclusion work, as it provides more staff in a variety of departments to advance the work. Another achievement was the Racial Equity Action Plan, which was presented to Council on May 26th of 2020. And it highlighted the city's commitment to racial equity work, as well as applying racial equity lenses as needed to priorities on the strategic roadmap. And the next slide will actually highlight some recent updates to that work. Another achievement, the city incorporated equity considerations into the COVID-19 response over the last 10 months or 11 months now. This included free COVID testing, food distribution, family support grants, rent moratorium, and relief. We've incorporated racial equity into public safety community engagement. As most of you are aware, we began community conversations around public safety during the summer of 2020, which has advanced to a policy innovation workshop now. And we really wanted to highlight the voices of those who have concerns regarding public safety and make sure that their stories, as well as some of the data we received in surveys, provide us the ability to make the best decisions we can in how we improve the services that we do provide regarding public safety. Lastly, we've begun DEI trainings for boards and commissions. That, once again, is something that we're hoping to continue over the course of this year. I know the CSC our Community Services Commission received a presentation. And once again, this is something that we're looking to continue to do. Next slide, please. So this is going back to the racial equity plan. Some of the proposed work for 2021 is the equity analysis. Each department head is identifying a strategic roadmap project for implementation using a racial equity lens. They'll be teamed up with a member from Saphir and Associates and members of the GARE staff. So we want this work to be as integrated as possible with staff, with our consultant, as well as the E-team. It's going to be a learning opportunity for participants to use the equity analysis toolkit that's been presented. And these projects will serve as case studies for future projects. So it's going to be a good way to see what strategies work and don't work, and whether or not they're feasible to apply in different areas going forward within projects that take place. Next slide, please. And here's some additional work proposed for 2021. We want to continue to support community safety work. Once again, we are moving forward with the policy innovation workshop and hoping that leads to more work in this area. We want to focus on data collection that is disaggregated by race. The more data that we have, the better, but more importantly, data that is specific to, this term diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's going to provide us a greater ability to determine if the services we're providing to the public are having the same effect and are equitable across everyone within Hayward. We want to continue to bring DEI trainings to boards, commissions, and staff. I said that is something that we would like, that we're in the midst of planning. And then we want to explore staffing models to further lead and support diversity, equity, and inclusion work. As of now, a lot of DEI work is being taken on by GARE staff and other city staff that are interested in helping and that are passionate about helping. And this is on top of their normal workloads. So we're definitely hoping to look at staffing models to further lead this. And with that, I'm available to answer any questions, and I'll hand it over to Civic Makers for discussion points. Thank you.
Before we jump into that, I just wanted to build on what Nick had talked about in terms of having the executive team work on incorporating an equity lens in the strategic roadmap projects. I'm really excited about this effort because I think it's really a way to help start to operationalize diversity, equity, and inclusion in the organization. And I think a lot of times, just like there's innovation theater, there's equity theater, where it is, we make it a special project, we throw some resources at it, but it doesn't actually become part of the culture of how we look at things and how we look at the work that we're doing. And so this seemed like a really, really fantastic way to help the executive team start to understand, how do you apply an equity lens to a project, you know, in sort of a routine way. How does this become part of the process that we go through when we're doing our work as an organization? So I'm particularly excited about this effort for the year, and I think it's going to really help all of us, you know, do a lot of learning. It's not about critiquing or accomplishing; it's about learning and growing as we do this work. So I'm grateful to the GARE cohort for supporting that, and so just wanted to share those additional comments.
Councilmember
Zermano has a question.
Just a quick question, a short explanation of what focus on data collection that is disaggregated by race means.
Disaggregated.
Yes, I think that's the second bullet point. I don't know.
The second bullet point on that slide. What exactly does that mean?
Sure. So for that specific point, you know, when we're collecting data, right now we want, like I said, we want to know if what we're collecting or the data that we're collecting is, I don't want to say separated, maybe is a bad word, but how it's affecting different groups of people, how that is separated out, and the effects that has on the overall outlook of the data. That's my take on it. I think Jessica can explain a bit more as well.
I just wanted to give an example of a way that we've done this, which is looking at the data at the navigation center and who is actually moving into permanent housing in the exits from the program. And so looking at it across races to make sure that it's not just one group of people who are exiting into permanent housing, and that it matches the population of the general homeless population in Hayward. So that's just one example of how we are operationalizing that in the work that we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Nick or the GARE team?
Don't see any at the moment.
Mayor, I have a question.
Oh, Councilmember Marquez.
Sorry, I wasn't quick enough to raise my hand.
And yeah, okay.
My actual hand versus the. So thank you for this work and for this update. I'm just curious, out of the 17 members, has that remained consistent from Hayward employees? And then just remind me, obviously this is a not volunteer, but above and beyond their normal daily task. So can you just remind us of how these individuals were selected? And my main question is whether or not we still have continuity in that group.
I would say for the most part, yes, there's still continuity. We've had, there's always some turnover that happens with employees. So I know we've had one member of the first cohort who did turnover or leave city employment, but for the most part, it's pretty consistent. And then, mostly it is on a volunteer basis. If employees, obviously in the first and second cohorts, you really want people who have a passion for this work and are interested in helping their fellow coworkers sort of learn, because these are going to be sort of train the trainer individuals, and they're going to be working with other employees in the organization to bring these ideas and topics to the fore for those.
Okay, thank you. And then just one quick example. I think staff did an amazing job when we looked at the first round of rent relief funding. I think that was some really detailed, specific data points, and I'd like to see more of that. So thank you for that good work.
Thank you.
Councilmember Andrews.
Yes, I wanted to know if you wanted comments on GARE alone right now, or have it within the strategic priorities, because I wanted to see if we were talking about GARE in the other priorities as well.
I don't know, Mary, if it's showing.
Yeah, I think this would be the appropriate time when we get to the it's put into the organizational health, and because that has so many other items, I think this would be a good time to talk about that.
Okay, so wait until organizational health.
Oh no, I mean, now I think now is a good time to talk about those items.
Right.
Yeah, just because it might get buried with the other.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so a couple of things I brought up with the GARE while on Planning Commission was we look at, a lot of people look at everything through an equity lens. And one of the biggest things that I look at from an equity lens is urban planning. And so similar to what we see in CEQA, where we look at cultural resources, environmental, all these other things, I brought up the opportunity for us to look at our projects with that equity lens and seeing how that impacts the community that's there. Is that something that we're going to see from the GARE on a more detailed level of how GARE will be applied to certain projects within the city, not just development projects, but just projects in general for different departments? And then another thing I brought up with GARE is we were looking at pathways for high school students because a lot of the times there's not the awareness that there's other opportunities for different careers. And the city has a lot of different types of careers within the government, and wanted to see if there's going to be some kind of coordination with Hayward Unified, Cal State East Bay, and connecting about how you two can work at this type of for this type of job in government. So maybe an engineer can shadow someone, a student can shadow an engineer or something like that. And then I also brought up there's programs where they actually go into the classrooms and then teach city government to students. So I know that our Hayward Unified students come to city council meetings and Hayward and planning commission meetings, but also there's opportunities where you can have a mock city council meeting within the school so they can see how government works in their space. So I was just wondering if some of that feedback was incorporated in this work.
I will chime in just quickly. I think that some of that is incorporated in the city's racial equity action plan that was actually presented to council last May. And that is part of the sort of underlying work that the GARE cohort will continue to do. There is a whole section on sort of employment and personnel related things. So that includes not just recruitment and retention, but also, how, internal employee education. So I think that speaks to the, how do we get into the community and talk to folks and encourage them to come into the organization. And I think we've done a lot of conversations about how do you incorporate, and that's part of why we're doing this learning around how to incorporate equity analysis into the projects that we're doing, is how do we start to look at that for example, development projects, things like that. So I do believe that it is encompassed in the racial equity action plan. Obviously, there's 17 people that are working on it in addition to all of their other workloads. So I think trying to work on that as time is available, but maybe Nick wants to make additional comment on behalf of the cohort.
Yeah, and I'll say for the GARE cohorts, we do the 2019 and the 2020 GARE cohorts. We have been in communication, and we are identifying projects that we'd like to either take on or see the feasibility of doing them. So we can definitely bring that suggestion back to the group and engage interest on how that could work.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just jump in? I mean, I think the process they're talking about is very formal, but I can tell you on the development side, like the 238 projects, or even when we're talking about development applications and some of the recommendations we make, I can tell you informally, there's a lot of conversations being just had about what type of development would most help our most vulnerable, or help geographic areas, or should we prioritize, certain things in certain areas. So I just want you to know, informally, there's a lot of discussion going on as well that you don't necessarily see in the kind of formal process they're talking about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember Wahab.
Thank you. I'll try to make this pretty brief. I just want measure in anything that we do regarding accountability is how do we actually measure what is being done from what we had to what is being done. Obviously, it's a journey, so to improve. Number one. Number two is the accountability piece of it, is that we do want to hold high standards, right? We really want to focus on, as I always say, spreading the love, right? So making sure that we do focus on the entire city, not on just a certain segment of the city, not just on a certain service to one particular neighborhood or group or anything like that. So just having those accountability measures in place, because we do see that tends to be our crutch. And so I think previously we've asked for, a GIS mapping of like, where do we give grants, right? How are people being affected by this, right? So it's just basic things that if we can have, when you guys do provide the report outs, that we can visually see what's going on. And just kind of just making sure that we at least see that, so that if accountability needs to take place, or we see that one group is lacking, whether it's a certain department or a certain program or certain anything, that we can have some accountability measures for that particular area. Other than that, in regards to the GARE cohort, which I'm very supportive of, but I'd like to understand how you guys select the individuals from the GARE cohort. That's a mouthful. Cohort.
Mostly they self-select as participants, and then their department head signs off on their participation.
Okay, and that's completely fine. It's obviously people interested want to do it, and hopefully that we can train more people through it. So for the time being, I guess that's sufficient. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I just, in response to a couple of those comments, I would note that something Councilmember Andrews talked about, really interacting with, especially the young people of our city through the high schools and all. It occurred to me the Raising Leaders program that Davita Scott has developed, and that we've done a lot of work with in terms of providing internships, would be an excellent model, perhaps, to try to get out to open up to more participants in our school system. And I would just comment that I had the opportunity to meet the new president of Cal State East Bay the other day online, and in a virtual meeting, not in a person-to-person meeting, but in any event, as part of our conversation, I brought up the workforce development and working with the university in that capacity as one of the priorities I think that we all have for our relationship with the university. So just wanted to add that in. So I don't see any more council hands raised right now. So you want to go on?
Sure. But Nick, Jessica, the whole GARE committee, thank you for that incredible work. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Christelle, who's going to give us sort of how we're going to go about tackling each of the priority areas. And then we'll actually get into housing, and then we'll take a break. Christelle?
All right. Thank you, Jim. You want to change the slide? So before we get started with our first priority area, which, as Jim said, is housing, I just go through this process with you. So for each priority area, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look back at the revised proposed project list, as was done with the staff kind of working process to come up with that revised list that shows what you already saw in the survey, which is what projects are on track, what's been sort of extended, and what projects have been added. And then you'll get a brief update from staff about progress made in that area, and some explanation behind what was done to come up with that those proposed lists. And then we'll also share with you the survey results. Then we will go into dot voting, and you'll do this in the chat box. Jim will explain specifically what to do when we get to that. But you saw it in your handout. Essentially, you'll get 25%, you'll get to vote on 25% of the projects for each priority area. So because the priority areas have pretty big differences in the number of projects under each one, we've done it that way. You'll do that in the chat box. We'll explain how to do it when we get there. The reason that we wanted to do dot voting first is so that we can use that to really focus the discussion, to highlight areas of consensus and divergence, and really focus our conversation there. So through this voting and discussion, I just want to emphasize that what we hope to get out of this is your direction to the E-team so that they really understand what your priority list is. So what are your non-negotiables for the next year? And this is going to help them with their prioritization process. And so they will take this input and they will come up with updated lists and come back to you to share those draft lists and have an additional discussion. So this is not final today. This is your high-level guidance on your non-negotiables. And then the next thing I wanted to share before we proceed is just as we had these conversations with staff, as we looked over the results from the council and E-team survey, some of these kind of considerations for prioritization came up, things that people thought were really important to keep in mind when reprioritizing the project lists. So just a quick reminder to keep in mind as we go through. Of course, COVID-19 and economic recovery is top of mind for folks. We already talked about prioritization and resource alignment, but really kind of the specifics of, is there budget, is there staff, is there time? Also, it came up a little bit around sort of, there's a unique federal and state funding environment. There might be sort of funding and policy opportunities that we don't want to miss. So that's something to keep in mind. And then as City Manager McAdoo already mentioned, we can start a list for what are the projects that maybe they felt like a big priority last year, given everything that's been added to people's plates. Maybe it makes sense to revisit these in 2024 when we update the strategic roadmap. So what are those things that we can kind of move into, as we like to say at Civic Makers, bike rack instead of parking lot? So that would be your 2024 list. And now I will hand it back over to Jim and we will get started with our first priority area.
All right, we'll get started with the first of 6 priority areas, that is to preserve, protect, and produce housing. And I am going to turn it over to Jessica and Amy, who will give a short staff presentation.
Thanks, Jim. Good morning, Council and Mayor. I'll just jump right into it. So as you saw in the survey, many of the housing projects or many of the projects in the housing domain are on track to meet the original deadline, where some have been extended or shifted due to COVID. And then several new projects have been added. And also just to reemphasize, as Assistant City Manager Ott said earlier, that several of these projects that are on track are definitely still ongoing. Jim, are you our next slide guy? Thank you.
I am.
Great. So in terms of these new projects, we wanted to start there. Just a quick list through the Housing Division has implemented and then monitored state level and federal level residential eviction moratoria. We've implemented a COVID-19 rent relief program that's been funded with over $1.7 million. We've did an analysis in the summer of alternative rent increase thresholds, which wasn't related to COVID, but came out of kind of our 6-month update on the residential rent stabilization ordinance. We've expanded mediation services to tenants and landlords who need support developing a repayment plan for unpaid rent that's due to COVID. Our previous mediation services were just for residential rent threshold dispute resolution. Sorry, that was a lot of words. Our residential rent threshold dispute resolution process, but we've expanded that to include tenants and landlords from non-rent stabilized units who are experiencing financial challenges due to COVID. We've also allocated and administered quite a bit of funding for homelessness and housing services, primarily from the Community Development Block Grant Emergency Funds, and are on track to open an annex to the Hayward Navigation Center, which I think Jessica will tell you a little bit more about.
Great. Thanks, Amy, and good morning, Mayor and Council. So some successes and achievements from last year. We did maintain operations during the pandemic at the Navigation Center, albeit reduced due to the pandemic, but we did have 45 exits to permanent housing, and additionally applied for and was awarded a 5-year grant through the permanent housing, I think it's permanent local housing allocation. And so that will be $650,000 approximately each year for 5 years. So total, it'll be about $3.9 million allocated towards the navigation center. Additionally, development services was awarded funding for projects that will take place next year, which includes $310,000 in SB2 funding and $490,000 in LEAP grant funding.
And I'll jump back in here. The Let's House Hayward strategic plan development is underway. We're in really the home stretch right now. Our consultant partners at Homebase have collected a substantial amount of stakeholder feedback from folks with lived experience of homelessness service providers, business partners, staff, community members. And they're currently drafting a year one memo to inform our budget for fiscal year 22. Additionally, as I was mentioning before with the new projects, one of the big successes and achievements that we're really proud of is the COVID-19 response in terms of, in a really pretty quick turnaround, allocating over $3 million in emergency community development block grant funds. A lot of those funds went towards economic development and food security, but there was also a large chunk that went towards homelessness prevention and homelessness services, like funding our local shelters and that kind of thing. And again, part of that is that 1.3 million in rent relief, 1.73 million in rent relief.
So some considerations for 2021, as we talked about in the last slide, there are grant funds for development services. So there's funding, but at this time, insufficient staffing to fully complete the following projects, including the housing element, the ADU ordinance update, upzoning of the RS district with high general plan density, the density bonus update, and that's both due to staffing vacancies as well as the need for additional consultancy services. And then an additional consideration is the project around expanding emergency shelter sites in Hayward, which is currently paused due to pending state legislation.
And as was mentioned earlier with the Let's House Hayward strategic plan, that's really going to be dependent, implementing that plan is going to be dependent on our budget allocation staffing capacity. Additionally, both exploring conversion of tax defaulted properties and creating marketing materials for incentivizing housing production, both of those were postponed from year one, primarily due to needing staff resources to respond to COVID. And I think with that, we turn it back over to Civic Makers.
Find your voice, Jim.
Oh boy, I did the typical Zoom faux pas. I was just thanking Amy and Jessica for their hard work and for that presentation. So if you recall, in the Council E-Team survey, for each of the roadmap priorities, we asked you a series of questions. And two of them were this, is how comfortable are you with staff's revised draft project list? And also, are the projects listed here the best ones to achieve this priority? And then for both, the bell curve centers around, yeah, we're comfortable. Some people very comfortable, some not. And again, on the, are these the right priorities? Are these the best ones? Most people agree, some strongly agree, some disagree. So have some work to do, but the bell curve is not terrible. And then we asked you, like, what are your priorities? What would you recommend to delay, and what would you recommend to drop? And so for priorities, definitely homeless and affordable housing were the two that came mentioned the most in your open-ended questions and comments, open-ended comments. Keep people housed through COVID, and then too many projects and not enough resources was the other two that came to the top of your priorities. In terms of delay, possible projects to delay, changing RS zoning, though I will add that another person said specifically don't delay RS zoning. Add a section to housing and housing development staff reports to track accomplishments for housing element goals and programs, and analyze alternative rent increase thresholds. Those were the suggestions to delay. And then drop suggestions were projects with additional costs. Nonprofits should get their own funding and may not need NOFA process to allocate dollars. I should finally add that 5 people said don't delay any projects or drop any projects. We then asked you, is there any additional projects that we should add to the roadmap? And there were a number of suggestions. I won't read them here. I'll let you read them. Hopefully you should see the ones that you suggested on this list. But when staff took a look at this list, what they found was all the projects suggested were either currently represented in the roadmap and or the subject of a current or future council working session. And so they've tried to connect the dots. So if you see in red, that first one, amend inclusionary housing ordinance to require housing to be built in most cases, that already relates back to project 5B. Or consider more density, that relates back to project 4B and project 9. This is all in your handout because it's probably hard to say, hey, which of my priorities here, projects here relate back to a project that's on the roadmap. Because we're on video and Zoom, I can't show you both side by side, but hopefully this information, you can relate this information back to your handout to see the correlation. Because staff thought that most of the suggested projects relate back to something they're working on or was going to be the focus of a council work session, we wanted to do our dot voting. We wanted the foundation, the basis, to go back to staff's revised proposed project list. And so these are the projects that we're going to use as the basis of our dot voting. And again, the reason we're doing dot voting first is because we want to see, we want you all to visually see areas of agreement and disagreement. So then your discussion can hone in on those areas. So, okay, this is going to be a little bit of a creative endeavor, but we're going to actually try to do the dot voting. So here's the instructions. For housing, you're going to get 7 virtual dots, and the moderators will place the dots on the screen for you. And Christelle and Mary, who are my cohorts in this, I think Christelle and Mary, if you could do my dots for me, that way I don't have to get out of presentation mode, and so they can hopefully see them coming up live as you do them. Council members, in the chat box, you're going to write the numbers of the projects you're voting for. So for example, if you were to get 4 votes, I know in this one you get 7, in the chat box, you would write 1B, 2C, 6A, 12D. And I'll put this screen back on so you can see which projects you're specifically voting on and what the numbers are. And you're voting for the highest level of detail available. So for example, if there's a project 1 and it has subsections A, B, and C, then each of those A, B, and C would require a separate dot. However, if there's a project that just has one number like 6 or 10, then you can just vote that for 1 dot. So again, here you can have 7 dots for this. Now, we were originally going to have a stamp tool that we were going to use. The stamp tool had the hearts and the stars and the X's and the check marks. We're still going to use those, but we're having to do it a little differently. Hopefully you won't notice too much of a disruption. And what we try to do is you are listed here in the order that you appear on the website. And then we originally did it in the stamp order as appears on Zoom. And then there's also a little bit of rainbow order. Regardless, that's why you were assigned the certain stamp or color you were. There was no other conspiracy. We tried to have a little rhyme and reason. Hopefully you can accept the color.
Councilmember Andrews, we're not trying to X you out.
No. There was nothing like that. Nothing
And,
like
and
that.
you know, just for the record, Councilmember Marquez's color is lavender. Everybody knows it's lavender.
Oh,
the entire city of Hayward knows it's lavender, and I end up with lavender. I'm just saying.
I'm so sorry.
I will say, Civic Makers asked me if there was going to be an issue with it, and I was like, no, it'll be fine, I'm sure. So it's my fault if there's any mistake here in terms of color or icon.
You don't want any
Oh,
stars.
good, but
All right. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. If you can, in the chat, go ahead and in the chat, write down the numbers of the 7 projects you would like. Put it all in one line or in one entry, and try to do it in numerical order. That'll make it easier for us. And I'm gonna listen for
but just the number and letter, not the whole title.
Yeah, just all I want
the
is
number
like
and letter separated by a comma.
Okay, let me just, and we get 7, right? We get 7, and we can, use them on any, like we could put 4D, 4E, 4F, for 3 of them. But there are projects on here that have to be done, like the housing element, so how do we, that has to be done. It's going to be done, or we're in trouble with the state.
I would recommend that you focus, like if you know, like for example, the housing element, if you know that that's something we're legally going to have to do, don't make that your priority. Like I would focus on those projects that are sort of the more discretionary ones, because those are the ones that we are going to struggle to figure out how do we want to prioritize them, because we have to get the legally required ones done. Right. So that's what I would suggest to the council is if you're aware of certain projects that are legally required or, or mandates or whatever, I would not use a priority dot on one of those.
Yeah. My only additional
3 lists. Oh, sorry, Jen. Go ahead.
No. I was just saying my only additional thought though is that if you want to discuss the housing element and you think, because there is, I think with everything going on, that housing element could be just meet the statutory requirement, or it could be a much bigger community conversation about single family zoning and other things. So I think my only caveat to what Kelly said is that if you do think that we should be using that as kind of a larger effort to and really prioritize it in a much bigger way, then you could put a stamp on that, and then we could have that discussion. So just another, again, this could just be a opportunity for you to have a discussion about something you think is really important.
And we're using all 3 lists, including the added 18% and the ones that are on track to be. Yeah. Okay.
For instance, like the rent relief program, we've had internal conversations about should we continue that and just have that become a permanent program. Well, if you all put that down as a priority, then that's going to tell us we need to start thinking, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen for sure, but it means staff needs to really start thinking about how to continue that program going forward. And remember, this is just a tool to get us talking, to get us, thinking. Yeah. So don't feel like, we can have a conversation about it.
I want all of them. No.
Right.
Okay. Councilmember Wahab has a question.
Thank you. So my only problem with this is the fact that, okay, so some of it, like I said, we're doing, right? So it's for me, it's on track, if you will. Number 2 is that since these are bullet points, I just want to be very clear to the public that's watching, as well as our staff, that since it's just a bullet point, it does not tell us exactly what we are trying to pursue, if that makes sense, right? So that is my, for example, even the example you gave, Director, out of the rent, support, if you will, right? It's not clear here that it says to continue on even after COVID, right? So that is my hesitation with this. I will do my best, but as you guys know, it depends on what we're trying to do with housing that I care about.
Yeah, and that's what will come out in the discussion, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And in a future work session, and then when we bring, the rent relief program, this is just the beginning. It just is to start to kick off the conversation, help us understand it's a tool. This is really just the beginning, not the end of the conversation.
Yeah, and it may require that we bring it back for further discussion if there's some conflicts about the priorities.
Yeah.
And just a quick question, the affordable housing, the specific section about the percentages, I've asked about this multiple times. it looked like there's two parts that were highlighting that. So I just want to make sure, where is that specifically? Is that, do you consider that in the housing element or the affordable housing ordinance, or,
Which one? I'm sorry, I started looking at the chat. I apologize. Which one?
About percentages of
the 10%,
that would be in 5 with the when we're that's more specific to the affordable housing ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be 5A if you're talking about, making sure we're tracking our accomplishments and measuring them, which I know is something you've brought up is important to you. That would be kind of 5A.
Oh, what about increasing the percentage, right?
Oh, that's part of 5B, right? Okay. Where if we were to bring back a work session on revisions to the affordable housing ordinance, then that one of the revisions that you might want to recommend or to propose would be to increase that percentage. I know there was another council member had a comment about making on-site a requirement as opposed to fees, and that could be part of that discussion.
That's 5B then would be.
Yeah, and staff has a lot of thoughts about those things. So we would want to bring that back in a work session, make sure you had all the information, give you our professional judgment, give you the numbers, and then that could be part of a work session where you would then make decisions about whether or not you wanted to change the policy or leave it as is.
Okay. All right. And how much time are we, was that it, Councilmember Wahab? Did you
I'm going to give my best shot and see what happens.
Yeah, that's what we're all doing here.
And it's okay if you want to do one more. I mean, try to keep it to that, but it's okay. This is just a tool. We're not. This is.
And how long are you giving us for this to put these things in the chat?
Well, I would say as soon as you can. We've already had a few members do it. I see 3.
Okay. Well, then let's get started. I don't see any other questions. So.
I just ask for everyone's patience because we need to. It looks like I might have to get out of presentation mode.
Yeah, Jim, you're going to have to go into the.
Yeah. So you're going to see. You've all seen a PowerPoint, so it won't scare you.
And also, I want to say, Christelle and I are doing our best to move these around, but if you see that we made a mistake, please put it in the chat and we'll correct it.
Yep. So you'll see the sausage being made on the backside. I was going to play some hold music, but we couldn't necessarily agree on what we wanted to hear. And so if someone has a musical interlude while we record these votes, I'd be happy to entertain that.
I need the list again. It disappeared.
Oh, okay. I will, let me put it up for you. I'll just put it up for you in editing mode here. So you can start to see our civic maker and Hayward elves are quickly adding votes to the plan. And Christelle and Mary, now that I'm in, well, I can't see the chat. Maybe I can get the chat back up. Okay, so Andrews, Salinas. And once everyone's finished, I will go back into presentation mode. I'll show you the results. And then we have about 15, 20 minutes for discussion. And how we're going to do this is we're going to give every council member 90 seconds in a round robin format to state their opinions. And then we'll sort of open it up for more popcorn discussion. But we only have total about 15 to 20 minutes for this. And then we'll take a break. You're all doing great. Thank you. It's exciting. Okay. Christelle, do you need me to do Councilmember Wahab's votes?
Yes.
Okay. Let's make sure we get those recorded. Oh, it's down there somewhere. There it is. 4A.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question while this is
Sure.
happening? On 4A, the moderate income financing model, I'm assuming that that's CalCHA. Is it something other than that?
That was what it was initially, yes. I think we left some of these with complete projects just because we were afraid, some of them are kind of half complete. So just to keep it so that this list would be the same. If you guys vote for that, and I think maybe like, for instance, Councilmember Wahab voted for that. If her focus is on workforce housing, then maybe we can have that discussion. And so we could even broaden that or have a bigger discussion about it, not just being the CalCHA model, but also wanting to do more to support workforce housing. So I have a feeling that's why she voted for it. I won't speak for her, but so it's like I said, it's a little imperfect, but yes, some of these things are complete.
I appreciate that. Just sort of helpful if we're all using the same frame of reference.
I know. Yes, that is complete technically, but if there's a discussion, and we can move hers later if during the discussion she'd like to do that.
I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the frustration will be the fact that we don't exactly know what these bullet points fully entail, right? But I guess we're all going to kind of give it a best shot. But I also included everything, so parentheses.
I just added 2.
Okay. Thank you.
I overlooked it. I'm sorry.
As I said, we had another way to do this morning, which, as many things, we ran into some technical difficulties. So we appreciate you bearing with us as you see the sausage being made here. All right, I think we're good.
I'm good. Mary, are you good?
Yes, give me just one more second. Something seems to have moved around, but give me 20 seconds here.
You know what I think is they look different on our different screens because some of them look like some of the votes don't look aligned on my screen, and they probably do on yours. But we'll do the best we can here.
Okay, I'm done.
Done. Okay, let's try this out. And I have to move all the chat features and the participant features. Oops. That is not what I want to do. Okay. So here's the voting. You can see what people voted for and what they didn't. And we'll start the discussion, 90 seconds. Let's start with the mayor.
Okay. Let's see. So what do you want us to be saying right now?
You don't have to say anything.
Defending my hearts, or I get, okay. So what do you want?
I think to talk a little bit about what your priorities are. If you don't use the full minute and a half, that's great. Then there can be more time for discussion among all the council members, but it's a chance for you to talk about why you chose the projects you did and some of your thinking.
Okay. I think I chose, I look at 11 and, we know coming out of this shutdown and economic downturn that we are going to have continuing problems with people struggling to pay rent. And that is really a major area we need to pay attention to. I think funding for the Navigation Center is sustainable funding. That's something I'm personally working on through county and state, through the county and state, and that's going to be really important for us to have going forward. And I added in 3 because I do think we need to look at our way of sheltering people who are out in the streets, in the winter when it's raining, and continue that effort. And then, I added 9 because that is something we have to do, but I would like to have that open, robust discussion about it, and not just do it, just meet the requirements and, not get in trouble with the state. I think that it's an opportunity and we should take it to really look at that program. And then did I miss anything? Oh, and then I put 5B because, I'm one of the ones who wants to look at making the building housing on site a requirement rather than, paying the inclusionary funds. So, and have that discussion, and that certainly can include also raising the percentage.
Great. Councilmember Wahab.
Yeah, so I think it's no hidden secret that housing is my priority overall. I think that some of this stuff was already done or in place, or I think that council has kind of decided to move along when we talk about some of the points. So I definitely wanted to focus on basically creating a plan, which we, in my opinion, have semi-done on homeless reduction strategic plan. It's kind of in the way. Or on way. I do want to change a lot of what we're doing around moderate income finance models, the density bonus, the ADUs. I want to streamline all of that. I think we've talked about it in the past, sitting on the homeless and housing task force. And then the revisions, I personally think the ADU percentage has to go up. 6 to 10% is not enough, and we have to be honest about that. And then with the Affordable Housing Trust, I know I have said many, many times that we do need a down payment assistance program for the entire city. I think that's a priority for me. And then when we explore programs to convert tax defaulted properties to affordable housing, I think that's a great idea. The city has kind of like, first dibs, if you will, on some of these properties. So it is very much a priority. And I do believe that homelessness is and should be a focus. However, we are focusing on it. In regards to funding and stuff like that, I think our team is really, really good at paying attention to that in general. So I think it naturally comes to them. And then as far as the Navigation Center, and anytime we partner with somebody, especially nonprofit, I do want them to be self-sustaining. I've stated that multiple times as we move into other aspects. Our focus should be policy, and hence why I focused on the policy-oriented pieces.
Great. I see Councilmember Marquez has her hand up.
Yes. First, I want to start off with just thanking staff. It's pretty remarkable to see everything you've accomplished in the year of so much. I guess what we could expect is just to always have the sense of uncertainty this last year. So thank you so much for everything you've done. It's pretty remarkable. So the areas that I landed are 1A for me. I'm just very pleased that we have the Navigation Center. I think we've adapted to COVID and the restrictions in terms of how many residents we can have there. Staff has been very nimble, and it's really important for us to secure funding to keep this center open. I also want to see us leverage funding with other partners. Maybe there could be a partnership with Union City, San Leandro, supporting communities so all the resources don't have to come from Hayward. And then 2A, definitely the plan is going to be imperative. I know it's going to take years to implement it, but we have to get started. I just want to say in the last 2 years, I don't know the exact numbers, but since the last point in time we did, you could just visually see the impact in our community of how many unsheltered community members we have. So we definitely need to tackle this issue with many partners. I really prefer the winter shelter versus the warming. My understanding is the warming is related to temperature, and I think we need to just forego that. People need to be housed actually throughout the year, not just in the winter. So I want to see us be able to expand those opportunities in Hayward. 5B, I'm very, very open and want to have a work session on evaluating what changes we could do with the inclusionary housing ordinance. I know legally we have some restrictions, but I'd really like to see how we can get creative so that we could incentivize that developers are actually building on site rather than the in lieu fees. We still need the in lieu fees to leverage other funding sources, but I think we need to be very targeted and get these buildings actually constructed in our community. I don't know where it's at, but I know something I pushed for many years ago was the RENA numbers and the housing updates being included on the staff report. I hope that continues. I don't think that should be something we vote on. It's just kind of like a format within the report. I fully acknowledge it takes staff time, but if we're already doing it, we're just building upon the existing data. 8A, identify and respond regulations to ensure Hayward projects. So yes, I want us to be able to go out after any type of funding available. Staff is amazing in securing grant funding, and I want us to continue that model. And I really like the idea in the past with CDBG funding when we had like the shovel ready projects, having that ongoing conversations with our affordable housing nonprofit partners. So if there is funding available that we can partner to target those dollars, we already have projects in the pipeline. So I want to see us kind of have that wish list, so to speak, always ready to go. And then 4D, it looks like I'm the only one that supports this. So I will take this off the list. I will revisit that in 2024. 11A, obviously COVID, a major priority is to keep people housed. I know that I wasn't supportive of the CPI, but that was mainly because of all the funding available right now to help people with rent. So I want us to continue to obtain those dollars and make it as flexible as possible for people who need assistance with rent to have access to them. So this is something we have to closely monitor. We don't know how much longer we're going to be with the COVID issues, and it's going to take time for people to get vaccinated and for our economy to rebuild. So this is definitely one that's a priority. I don't want to see more people displaced in Hayward. Thank you.
All right, before I see Council Member Lamnan has her hand up. Council Member, while you do that, I need to refresh the screen. You can start.
I was just going to add, I wanted to add to, in response to Councilmember Marquez, that on 4D, that I think that's something that the state may be doing for us, actually. So, you know, maybe it's off our plate and we'll benefit anyway from state legislation around that issue.
Yeah, and if it doesn't get in state legislation, it could be something we talked about including it as part of the housing element. That kind of more robust housing element process could very well be something, so we address that issue. So I agree.
And we're focused on equity around that, so it's not just the flatlands that get, you know, affected by that. So we've talked about this. It's a concern.
Yes.
Sure.
Councilmember Lamnan, would you like to begin, or do you want to wait for the screen to come up?
I'll do my best, and then we'll go from there. So I think, so both for the Navigation Center and the, I want to add my appreciation as well. It's phenomenal work done. Thank you. For both the Navigation Center and the strategic plan, I think it really is about implementation. I had originally the sustainable funding as one of my priorities, noting that there's been substantial progress about that. And not that it doesn't require staff time to continue to monitor, et cetera, but the building out that model, continuing to respond to opportunities like the hotel, et cetera, is why the operations piece was my priority there. And similarly with the strategic plan, if we don't talk about how we prioritize funding, shift our approaches from response to proactive empowerment and prevention, then we're never going to make a dent on homelessness. I feel really strongly about this, that we do a tremendous amount, but it is downstream. It is responsive stuff. And I'm not throwing stones at it. It is what we do. And it doesn't really change the percentages of folks on the street. It doesn't change the percentages of complaints. It doesn't change the situation for the folks. And so I think it's really important that we focus on the implementation of the strategic plan and that's going to require reallocating resources and being able to do things differently in response to the strategic plan, et cetera. So I see I'm a lone vote there, but I'm going to ask my colleagues to reconsider how we approach that.
What
I think
number
we're
was
not
that?
entirely unaligned. I just want to highlight that. And then
There's a question about what number you were referring to there.
What number was that? Sorry, that you
2B.
Okay.
And then wanted to, let's see, in terms of the reason I checked number 9 was for it to be a more robust discussion. I am concerned about single family housing, and then the density, the items under 4, number 4 items on the green side. Some of those are grant funded, so some of those will have to do. So I didn't use a dot there, but I do think they're important. And then lastly, I'll talk about the affordable trust funds. I was concerned that had gotten delayed, but the more I think about it, the more I wonder if we want to hold back on actually holding that RFP as we think about trying to come up with solutions regarding housing affordability, upstream solutions. We may want to use those funds on priorities that we identify rather than going out to the community in an RFP. And so that's why that didn't get a dot for me. It's not that I don't want to use the funds. I'm not sure that we want to go to the community for a whole other set of uses of that money. We may already have some identified priorities that we just haven't specifically tied the knot to. And I share the concerns about the ongoing COVID. My hope is that we're focusing on things that can prevent some of those issues. Obviously, some of it we'll have to continue to do over this year as the crisis continues. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I see Council Member Zermino has his hand up, and just a friendly reminder, if you could keep your initial comments to about 1.5 minutes, that'll keep us more on track.
I was going to say something about that, but I will not. Let's see. I agree. I agree that pausing some of these projects due to COVID and state or federal regulations is the best way to go. So some of these we really don't need to work on because they're going to be controlled by somebody else. Looking at outside funding, to me, it's important so that we pair up. I think somebody mentioned Union City, somebody mentioned, and one of them talks about the county. We need to ensure that we're not doing this alone, that the funds are from others. And my main point in my collection was that I want us to look for regional solutions. It doesn't, in my mind, why are we going to be the only city out of 102 Bay Area cities that does anything constructive on this? That, in my mind, it's not logical. So I always look for regional solutions. When we talk to ABAG, that's very important. Writing to Newsom, and just really get this, make sure that we all do it as a team, not just Hayward. Otherwise, everybody's going to flock to Hayward, and what are we going to do? Thank you.
Great. Council Member Andrews, would you like to? Yeah.
Sure. I concur on regional support, finding sustainable solutions for the Navigation Center. For emergency shelter sites, I would like to see if there's more opportunities to work with hotels or something. I live off of the Tennyson exit, and that is becoming an encampment. And I feel that if people could see that, they could see that we might need another shelter somewhere. So I seem like I'm the only one to identify that, probably because I see it every day when I get on the freeway. And then I am concerned about moratoriums. I'm concerned for the tenants, and I'm also concerned about landlords being able to keep their homes in order to rent out to tenants. So I'm very concerned about that. And then I want to include, and I concur with Councilmember Marquez on inclusionary affordable housing. I do want to keep the in lieu fees, but also want to increase inclusionary percentages and incentivize developers to include it as part of their project. So the rest you can see what I identified, but obviously it was very hard to pick just 7.
Thank you. And then last but not least, Councilmember Salinas.
Thank you. I just wanted to, just extend the thank you to staff. Clearly, this is an incredible amount of work, and I think last time when we did this, I want to, revisit what I said, 2 years ago, I believe, when I said, council, that we need to slow our roll to much extent, right? Because, before the pandemic, admittingly, and I'm guilty of it, that we were putting, we put everything out there, and we put everything, on the table, and with the expectation that staff was magically going to spring together and do it, right? And so I think the way staff sort of lined it up like this, in terms of extended timeline and added the way you laid it out right here, I think shows that the intent here. But I also want to say that I also looked and I also paid attention to the graph earlier about staff's feelings and staff's reaction to the survey and their input in the survey. So I saw that, and so that's certainly on my mind when I think about this, and it will be on my mind as I move forward through the rest of the morning. But I don't want to go into all of the detail of the chart. There's some things that now that I looked at, I have my dot on. There's probably some things that I can probably move around, and I'm not I'm not married to one particular thing or another. I generally agree with my colleagues. My only suggestion to my colleagues would be we just need to be focused, and we need to be and whatever we put on the table, we have to be committed to making sure that it gets done. And that's it. Just stay focused and so that we can get this done. But just a couple of things in general, comments about my picks. One, I absolutely agree with Councilmember Andrews. The homeless encampments, they're of course, we've seen an increase in them, and they're all over the city. And we're getting, we get the calls, neighborhoods are frustrated. They're angry, they're compassionate, but they're also frustrated. And it's part and parcel because they're not just there, but in the process that they're there, they're also destroying the spaces around them. Catching buildings on fire. These are the complaints I'm getting. I'm had a property owner who, they're destroying water lines. They're destroying. It's all of the collateral that happens while they're there. And so for me, that is a major issue. And I understand that there's part of the population that can be housed. But, I go back to the survey we did some time ago where I think it was an incredible large percentage of the folks that were homeless where I think the data showed us that they were many of the homeless were incapable of living by themselves and or living with somebody else, or they could not work for some reason or another. So there's a very specific population of people that I don't see help coming from the county. I certainly don't see support coming down from the state, but I don't know what to do with that. And it's expensive, and I get that. So, the homeless issue, I think it's got to, there's something has to get done, because the frustration is growing and growing, and the neighborhoods, that seems to be a central concern in the neighborhoods. Secondly, COVID-19, and it's in terms of the beginning where it said, where the comment was prioritizing projects and aligning resources. Families have been without income now for 11 months, and I don't see families bouncing back in the next 6 months or even 8 months. And so we're going to have to do, we're really going to have to align resources to figure out a way to either enhance our rent relief programs, find a way to enhance other protections so that, folks who are in housing can stay housed. And
Councilmember,
I was gonna say, yeah, sorry to interrupt. We want to make sure that folks are staying to
okay. Okay. Yeah. So COVID-19, and then lastly, housing programs. I keep working with the state and keep finding funding to support the work. So anyways, that's it.
So we would just want to give you about 5 minutes, not a lot of time, in case anyone wants to respond to each other. We'll just open it up popcorn style. You can just chime in whenever you want, but we don't have much time, about 5 minutes.
So I moved one of my votes already from, let's see, 3A to 4G.
We will do that. I'll do that after the break if that's okay.
Yeah, you could take off my 4D. But this is very helpful. And this doesn't mean this stuff goes away, right? It's just we revisit it at a later date. Yeah. Thank you.
It really just helps us refocus attentions. I think Councilmember Lehman had her hand up.
Break time. 90 seconds.
Just a couple.
Yeah, I'll defer to the break. I made my comment about homelessness and having real solutions be part of that. Permanent solutions be part of that. Thank you.
So does staff think that we're gonna move on now to another topic? I guess economic development is next, but does staff feel they got what they needed out of this?
Yes. I mean, I can tell you for me, and I've been corresponding a little bit with Christina. And so we feel like this is great feedback. And I will say, Councilmember Lamnon, we had some of those same comments about, putting a vote on the plan, but not on the implement. So I do want to kind of emphasize that from staff perspective, making sure the council understands that anytime you have a plan, you want to make sure you've got the resources and the prioritization of the implementation. So just kind of I wanted to add that because that was something we were talking about as well. But yes, this is very helpful. We appreciate it. And thank you very much.
Right.
And then just real quick, just for, again, my own purposes. So this is going to go to you guys, and then, we tally up what are, let's say, the top 5, top whatever. And then we prioritize even further as to how do you guys plan on doing this?
I mean, I'll just speak, Christina's on here too. She can chime in, but I mean, I think what we'll do is take this, we'll look at it. I mean, we already had some things that were kind of on our agenda and our thought, and homelessness is staffed through community services. Some of the other stuff is through housing. And so we will take this and kind of, not just in terms of years, but also in terms of quarters. What do we bring to the homelessness housing task force based on this? So we'll start to kind of take this and prioritize even further into a much more concrete quarterly work plan and a task force agenda plan. And so and then, we'll bring this back to you as part of a strategic roadmap work session and the budget. So there'll be further discussions for you to have, like, oh, staff, you didn't get it quite right. You're putting that in Q4, but we really would prefer to have that be, and so we can have some of those additional conversations. But also just like the fact that some of you are suggesting you might not want to do a NOFA, but you might want to spend the funds just with some recommendations from staff. I mean, that is because we're working on that staff report right now. So that's really helpful to Christina to hear. We might present some alternatives now based on this conversation. So we will start wrapping this into our work plan right away.
Okay. And the reason why I ask is because I know the task force, for example, when we sit, I know we've talked about the majority of this and we know a little bit more in depth as to how it's going to look for the city or potentially impact the city. So again, I just want to be cautious around the actual policy models specifically, but we'll move on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, yeah, I think go ahead, we can move on, but we can have more conversation. But even some of your comments that you gave us were helpful to hear and how we might frame a discussion about a revision to the affordable housing ordinance. So that was helpful. So all of this has been really helpful for us to then take that to the next level.
And Kelly, overall, this is not the end. This today isn't the end of the discussion, right? So you want to talk about what your plan is to have a second session.
So, and I noticed that we did have an attendee who has joined, and I just want to say that public comment was at the beginning of the meeting, but because we have such a tight agenda if the council wants to hold at the end for public comment, we can maybe reopen public comment at the end of the meeting, but I would suggest that we continue to move through the agenda so we can get through everything in the time frame that we had suggested. And we will be coming back in several more sessions with the council to basically present the revised plan in a work session. The council will have an opportunity to further discuss this based on the feedback we've heard, and then probably re-adopt the roadmap. And then it'll also be part of the budget process this spring as well.
City Manager, if I could just add, I appreciate public comments being reopened at the end, but if there's any individual that wants to make a comment and can't wait, they can always email us at our listserv email address. Thank you.
Great. And with that, why don't we take a 10-minute break? It is 10:23:24, so let's say 10:35. We will be back to our computers ready to tackle the economy. Thank you.
All right, we're going to get started pretty soon here. Welcome back. I think Mary's going to drive us from here forward.
Mm-hmm. Give me a second to pull that up.
And just a reminder that the chat is public record, and so we're want to make sure we use it for things that we are talking about or that have been mentioned or that will be recorded in some fashion.
One second.
Thank you for that reminder, Jen.
And I want to I've been trying to turn my Teams off, but I'll try and close, but they might pop up. So I apologize if they do. Let me go to slideshow. Okay.
All right, so we are moving into Grow the Economy, and I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer Ott to get us started.
Great, thanks. I'm going to do this on behalf of really, I think a lot of different divisions and departments work on this, but really economic development and development services, and then also the community media relations teams. We've been doing a lot of work. Can we go to the next slide, please? So a lot of meetings, a lot of projects that are on track, but a lot of added work and some things that did get pushed out because of that. But for instance, like on the 238 parcels, even though we think some of those timelines got pushed out, we're still working hard on these items, but a lot of added COVID response to really support our business community. Next slide. Yep. New projects. So a lot of these you're aware of, but I do, business, a lot of hand-holding, honestly, that things that in addition, which I'll talk about, a new small business recovery programs, there's just a lot of behind the scenes work that has happened to help the business sector with reopening assistance, with all the different changing protocols and changing regulations from the county, from the state. Every time there are changes like that, our staff at multiple levels are working with the community relations division, the economic development team, making sure we're getting the word out on those changes so they know how to comply. Significant restaurant assistance with helping restaurants access different funding. The sidewalk vendor ordinance, development services jumped in quickly, put a whole new permitting process together. And so just a lot of work kind of behind the scenes to help and handhold our businesses through this process. Next slide. Some other successes and achievements: passed a vacant building ordinance, which was huge, had been talked about for a long time, now working to implement that. City Center was demolished. Minimum wage ordinance was adopted and approved. We developed an emergency fee cap on third-party food delivery companies. The form-based code for Mission Boulevard was adopted. And then a couple of really, with economic development and community media relations, some very targeted campaigns towards some of our Tennyson as well as downtown to really promote local businesses and restaurants. Next slide. This is one of, I think, our biggest successes that occurred almost immediately. The economic development team jumped on this, was able to initially reprogram some of our existing budgeted funds and then really take advantage of the CARES Act federal funding, but designed and launched one of the first COVID business assistance grant programs and ended up becoming a model for the country. We got calls from all over the country asking us about our program. So received over 16,000 applications. I mean, so obviously demand outstripping our supply of funds, but we were able to award 76 grants. There are ongoing funds from CARES Act that we'll be able to add to that number. So we'll be adding additional grants to that through some of the CARES Act money. And then also we're able to use our grant program to provide a match to leverage our Hayward businesses are receiving county funding as well. So 91 Hayward businesses will be receiving that Alameda County CARES Act funds as well. Next slide. So just some considerations moving forward is that we froze one of our positions. We have an economic development specialist, a vacancy that we froze because of the fiscal issues confronting the city. So we are down staff. We also had some funding for special events that we usually keep in our budget going forward. So I think just thinking about how that gets, do we start to kind of go back to normal? Do we continue to use that money more for COVID recovery programming? And then we have already started really looking at potential recovery programs. So how do you help businesses get an e-commerce platform, or how do you get them kind of back to business as usual? And we don't have a long list of those programs yet because we really want to continue to do outreach with our small business community and engage them. And then we would use the CDC as a mechanism for kind of getting feedback on those recovery programs. We're very much starting to think recovery and how does our work plan shift to address that. Next slide. And I think I turned it over to Jim. Is that right?
I'll do this one.
Okay.
Thank you, Jen. All right. So going back to our survey results, we asked you, what was your level of comfort with the draft revised project list for this particular priority area? Not too different from what we saw for housing. Most of you were comfortable or very comfortable with the draft revised list that was proposed by staff. There's some, or you're neutral, and then at least one person was uncomfortable. And then in terms of agreement with the project, the question, does this list of projects, are these still the right ones to help us achieve this priority? And again, it was mostly agree and strongly agree, with at least one person sort of not being in agreement with that. Next slide. And then we also asked you what your priorities are for this particular area, and you told us 3 people said responding to the negative impacts of COVID. 2 of you said attracting and retaining employers. We asked you what projects you would delay. We got 2 for public art. We got marketing plan and opportunity zone campaign, gateways, council economic development committee. Those are 2 separate ones, as you can see. Community preservation ordinance, construction, business incubator. And then we thought it was noteworthy that 3 of you didn't list anything to delay, and there was nothing listed under what to drop. So we should have an interesting discussion ahead. And then moving on to the next slide, we see what additional projects were suggested from the survey. So we had looking for funding opportunities. Again, we've mapped these to, staff has mapped these to the existing projects in all cases for this particular priority area. For some other priority areas, there were certain projects that would be addressed in a future council working session on the strategic roadmap. But in this case, staff felt that there was pretty strong overlap between these and existing projects. So develop tools for property owners to activate vacant properties matches to project number 2, public art project maps to project 11, business partnerships maps to 13. So definitely if you feel there's some element of something you brought forward that isn't represented, we could bring that up when we get into the discussion. All right, now we will move on to our fun activity here. So in this case, you have 8 dots, 1 more dot than the last time because there's just a slightly longer project list. And so go ahead and pull up your chat box and list out your 8 numbers. And we will, as quickly as we possibly can, translate those over to the slides.
Mayor, did you have something you wanted to say?
Was there, you said something about the Council Economic Development Committee was one of the things, that's not actually a project. I'm not sure what that was referring to.
Yeah, so that was listed, maybe we got it wrong. Somebody under what to delay listed CDEC, and we thought maybe it was CEDC, but if you meant something else,
okay, I think they must have meant something else, because that's not a project, that's a standing committee, and it's CEDC, so CD, I wonder.
Maybe it was number project 12, Mayor, that had that in there. I mean, so maybe, but anyway, whoever did that couldn't try to clarify or
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll just take a minute or so for you all to give us your priorities, 8 priorities in the chat box in one line separated by commas.
Mayor, are you able to put the specific project number like 1A or 2B?
Well, I thought you said that we could put it, if we thought the whole thing was good, we could put that as one, and that was one number. So
I think it's fine.
That was able to add in things. I can, in my comments, emphasize what I think is important, but
yeah, I think it's fine because I think some of those, for instance, the marketing plan. I mean, I think you're saying that both the creation of the plan and the implementation are important.
obviously you can't implement if you don't create. So I'll look at it.
And just a point of clarification too, another one. Under, like things added, I mean, I noticed I put some stuff on things added. Things added, would this be another, is this also what staff have, they've added to the work list? I mean, we've all added to the work list, right? I mean, and this isn't, it's not, well, it's just added to the work list, right? I mean,
yes. I mean, the pandemic responses has already kind of been done and added, and we're still kind of working on that. But the recovery, we've already started to shift and do that. I mean, my impression is that the council agrees that that's the right approach. Obviously, if no one puts, their icon there, then that might say maybe we tone down those programs. But we do believe that we need to do some of that recovery.
Yeah.
I narrowed down 15 there for you.
Just a quick question. I support marketing, vacant, and strengthen, but I support 1A and 1B and 2A and 2B. So can I just put 1 to talk about A and B, or?
I think it's fine. Yes, you can. I mean,
Okay,
it just helps us know that those are.
That's what I did. Put 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thanks.
And great. Thank you all for sharing your votes. We'll just finish adding these in.
Christelle, while they're doing that, should we go? Are we short on time? Should we have them start chatting, or do you want to wait? And we can wait.
Jim, are you done and ready to start taking notes?
I am not quite ready.
Okay, we need another 30 seconds.
That's fine. You guys lead it. Sorry.
And does whoever want to call on us, or do you want us to raise our hands?
Why don't we, you had the list of council members as we appeared, I think, for some reason when you signed. So why don't you just start with the next person after me, and we'll go down from there and start. Can you do that?
Yeah, that works. We have it at the bottom of the screen there. So we would start with Wahab and then go in that order. And every time we switch to a new priority area, we can start with the next person.
Okay, that sounds good.
And Jim, you let us know when you're ready to start taking notes, and then we can have Councilmember
I will
Wahab
let you know. I'm almost there.
And I haven't quite finished my last person's, but I will. When you guys get started, I will refresh and share my screen.
Oh, we got 2 over here.
Okay.
I think I am ready.
You want me to begin?
Yeah, I think you can go ahead and begin. Thank you. Go ahead, Councilmember Wahab.
Thank you. I think that marketing overall for the city of Hayward is incredibly vital to even attract new business, especially as other cities will be competing for those same new businesses. And I stress new businesses because as much as we try to, obviously support the current businesses, we also know that some of them will no longer return to Hayward. So that's going to be a significant struggle. And I think that we need to kind of just do things in parallel. So new as well as supporting current businesses. The entire section of 3, so 3A, B, and C are important. To me, that is technically just one section. We do have to kind of make sure that people have jobs, make sure that people, focus on, there's opportunities out there and how can we ensure that there's opportunities out there. Number 6 is the cannabis ordinance. It as we've seen in just, one business, it does create a lot of funds and revenue for the city of Hayward, and we should capitalize on that sooner the better. Number 10 is blight. I think many of us do believe that there is still a need to combat blight. I also want to say just, the cleanliness of the city. So that's also, trash. It's a larger picture for me, but yes. And then number 12. So, I've been talking to some of these organizations, and I want to be very clear. We should not necessarily create a business incubator, especially since we have very limited resources and staff time. The economic development team is like 2 to 3 people max, right? And we know that that's not sufficient. We have to partner with people that already have this in place. And I would expand it. And I know I've been on meetings with the economic development team with some of these institutions, but I think that we need to broaden the base. Same thing for number 13. It is not that we need to just, there's a lot of small businesses that have actually stated to me that the SBA, there's other programs, not the SBA, that are actually a lot better and a lot easier to understand and works with them and understands their needs and so forth. So I do just want to broaden it compared to the traditional sense of, business experts, if you will. 8A and 14, or 8, I should say, and 14, technically all of it, COVID, it has to be done in parallel. And I know that's a lot for, a staff of like, but that's how I feel like it should be prioritized, but it should be done in parallel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wahab, and thank you for sticking to the 1.5 minutes. I just want to remind folks that we're going to try to stick to that 1.5 minutes so we can have discussion at the end and get through our agenda. So now we'll move on to Councilmember Andrews.
Thank you. So I am advocating for public art, not just because I think it's pretty. I think it actually helps with the appearance of the city, and it deters graffiti, and it also is a way to contribute to the culture that we desperately need identity here in Hayward. So I would still like to advocate for that. For the cannabis program, I would like to revisit that ordinance. There's businesses that are struggling, but then all of a sudden we'll see businesses as a micro business swoop in to become a cannabis business after approval. So I think we have some issues there that we need to tackle to see what's going on there. I do believe in the business concierge service, and I also believe that there's other programs out there that we can actually refer to. And I agree with Councilmember Wahab that there's a lot of resources out there. And if we can consolidate some of that information and give to our businesses here while ushering new businesses, I think that will be the most effective. And I also feel that there's a lot of concentration on industrial, but our residents need amenities here. We are going to other cities for amenities, and our industrial is thriving, but I have to go to a different city for goods. So I rather economic development focus on getting us amenities that we can actually support than trying to figure out over and over again what's happening with businesses in certain locations in Hayward. The other ones you can see that I've identified. Yes, we need support for COVID. That's it for businesses impacted by COVID. And I agree that I see them all as one, not just one part. So even 15 and 14 together, I kind of see as all encompassing. So that's what I have for right now. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And that was just under 2 minutes, which was great. And I'll move on to Councilmember Landon. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to focus my time on the two comments that both of my colleagues have mentioned, which is about partnerships that I think our Economic Development Department, even though understaffed, and I support us getting fully staffed there, do an excellent job. There are a lot of partners, as both my colleagues mentioned, and I'm all for the city working in concert. And to that end, I know Councilmember Andrews and the mayor talked about job workforce development, and I very strongly in support of that. And so my dot in this case went to item 3A, but I think that also includes the incubator component that Councilmember Wahab brought in. We may want to look at a summer jobs program. There's a lot of reasons that I think we need to look at a summer jobs program. And maybe what we need is a work session to really talk about what does the pipeline look like for the city jobs? What does the workforce pipeline for employers throughout the city look like? I'm not sure the best way to get it because it's touched on a lot of different places in this work plan. And perhaps one of the things we could do is sort of streamline that and bring the partners to the table to figure out who's got which pieces of the puzzle. Thank you.
Thank you. And you finished with 15 seconds remaining. And we'll move on to Councilmember Marquez. Go ahead.
Thank you again. Staff has done a phenomenal job. I really want to beef up the 3B, reestablish the business engagement and referral program. I think we had much success with that in the past. I'm also in support of getting this division fully staffed. And I'm not going to go over every point. I think it's pretty clear, but one thing I don't really see, but in terms of looking at things through the lens of equity, I think we need to be more creative and look at how we could incentivize for new businesses to hire locally and really train young people for these future positions. As Councilmember Lamnon and Andrews have alluded to summer programs. When I worked in City of Oakland, they have the mayor's summer employment program. I think that's something that we can mimic here in Hayward. I know that will take time to get that up and running, but we really have to grow the future workforce in Hayward. And I think we need to really invest in our young people and provide them with options. So I like to see any opportunity we can to implement that moving forward. And I only casted 7 votes because there's so much work to be done. I would really like to see us focus on 4 to 5 priorities, own in on that, and get those accomplished in the next year or two. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. And moving on to Salinas. Go ahead, Councilmember Salinas.
All right, Christelle, got your stopwatch ready?
Yes, I'm ready for you. You're on.
So 2 things. For me, it's COVID-19 recovery and doing everything we can possibly do to bring back our business sector, our retail sector, our neighborhood retail. And I know everything that everyone has said, I agree with. The marketing plan and opportunity zone campaign and all that stuff. Yes. But, I think as much flexibility and creativity our economic development team can have so that we can really bring back, or get out of this, slump that we're in, we need to give them the reins to do that. And lastly, amenities for families. We need amenities for families. And, cannabis doesn't do it, you guys. And, and everyone knows my position on that, but it seems like we put more attention and more focus on dispensaries than we do on bringing family amenities. And, and I think we should be changing our focus, quite frankly. But with that said, I'll end on that.
Beautiful. Right on time. Thank you so much. All right, moving on. And we have Zermenio.
Thank you very much. Let's see, in my mind, partnerships are important. Anytime we can do something with other agencies, it's tremendous. Small businesses are so important, so make sure that we work on the small businesses for local hires, teenage hires, elder hires. It's really very important. COVID recovery 14 and 15 is tremendous. Just a note, I have received several emails that the city, because of its closure, is not very friendly to folks who want to open up a new business in Hayward. So we need to work on that. And if it means working to help out our economic development department, then it needs to be done. Because the minute somebody wants to open up a business and they call City Hall and nobody answers, nobody does anything, that's bad. My 9th dot would go to public art. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. And finally, we'll end on Mayor Halliday.
Thank you. Thank you for Council Members Zermenio and Councilmember Andrews for the nod to public art. And I will say that I had put it thinking nobody else was going to support it. It's a personal thing for mine. But I think Councilmember Andrews pointed out, it really, it is important in terms of how people think about keeping the city looking. And it's something we've done well. And it could help some of the other things too, like jobs. And, the arts have suffered a lot during this, this pandemic. So it would help them. And then I will say that number 15 would be my number 1. And it's a little confusing about 14 and 15. So I just left 14 out altogether. But the COVID recovery, helping our businesses recover from this is just the prime thing that we all can do. And, I agree with a lot of, you can see what my choices were there. Obviously I want to do the marketing plan. Blight, so that's number 2. And what was the other one? Number the vacant buildings is 2, and the blight, there was blight later on. That's really important. That is something we certainly has gotten worse during the pandemic, and we need to do something about. And I'll just end by saying number 4, nobody put anything on number 4. And I totally agree with that, because I think maybe with the recession kind of still in place, it might be a good idea to hold off on that a little. We're still doing the Caltrans properties and give the economy a little more time to recover before we look to, who wants to do something with this wonderful property we have up there on the hill. So I think that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Great, and we'll have a couple more minutes here for discussion. Councilmember Wahab, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to ask, so for me, number 4 was public works to a degree, right? Obviously, and it would take a lot longer to even get that property ready for economic development. And so those are some of the considerations. And when we talk about economic development versus, revenue to the city, it's one of 2 things. One is obviously revenue to the city to sustain ourselves, but then the other piece right now, especially with COVID, is making sure that the rest of the economy, we have jobs, we have businesses, we have, stores and traffic and so forth. So I just wanted to highlight that personally, I have not really liked any of the lists that we've had, just because it's not very clear again. But that's my comment for that. So thank you.
And just to comment on the city center, we are actively working towards, it's really not Public Works. Public Works did their job, did a great job on the deconstruction of the building, but it is now with Mary and I to come back with a plan for disposition and development. And the reason we had prioritized that we were going to come on even on the 23rd of February is because it's about $9 million of city funds have been allocated to acquire the property and to deconstruct it. And so trying to see if we should move forward with that to try to recover some of that funding. But we don't have to decide that now, but I just wanted to share that with you.
You said Public Works has already completed the deconstruction, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we aren't recommending spending any more funds on like deconstructing the parking garage, because there may be a longer term use there, but we wanted to get the blighted tower down, which we did.
Yeah. So, and that's what I'm saying. If it's done, I do believe that it should have been removed from these lists. And I think there's plenty of that there. So.
Okay. Got it.
The other thing
Go
too,
ahead.
yeah, just briefly, the other thing too, and and I was trying to see if it was on here. I don't know if it might have been on another slide, but not letting go of Mission Boulevard. We I've said this before, and I'll continue saying it about while I know we're developing housing along the Mission Boulevard corridor. But I do not want to overdevelop housing on the Mission Boulevard corridor, and I'm gonna start pulling back on approving more, an imbalance of housing and commercial, and so we need to stay committed to commercial along the Mission Boulevard corridor. But more so focusing on family amenities along the Mission Boulevard corridor, because that's important.
Thank you for adding that. Does anyone else have any comments to add?
I'd like to add the same thing with the minimum wage piece, right? Since we've technically voted on it, it's been implemented, as of January, things like that should be slightly removed so we can actually really highlight our focus on what's really truly to be done, if you will.
Thank you, Councilmember Wahab. Was someone else trying to add a comment there? Lamlin?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify with Councilmember Salinas. I've heard you say family amenities a couple of times, and I'd love to hear a little bit more, just briefly, about what do you put in that bucket?
Well, family amenities like family entertainment. Family entertainment, one, family restaurants and family,
Recreation.
retail, family recreation, stuff like that, and, and downtown, my concern, my main concern about downtown right now, especially as we are approving more dispensaries, we're not going to get those retail that we would like because of the dispensaries. And I mean, I have personally had conversations with retail where they absolutely will not open next to a dispensary. And, so that's a problem. The other problem that is happening, the other issue that's happening is that property owners are holding back on showing their properties to family friendly retail opportunities or entertainment opportunities because they're waiting to see if more dispensaries are going to come. And so they're basically holding out and not, they're holding out waiting for their so-called eagle to land, so to speak, because of the potential that dispensaries will bring. So my concern is what we're creating will block family friendly economic potential.
Thank you for clarifying that, Councilmember Salinas. And we have Councilmember Andrews followed by Councilmember Zermeño.
I just want to say, I think there's a misconception about who uses cannabis. It's all range of people who use cannabis, and there's elderly folks who might need cannabis if they have an illness. It's not just attracting a certain population that is going to bring down the whole community because there's a dispensary. And I want to know how many bars do we have on B Street? I'm very curious because I walk down B Street and I walk by vomit by some of the bars that I see. I don't see that with cannabis. So I just want to make sure that if we're going to single out a certain business, that we also think about the other businesses that are happening on B Street that I visit a lot of those bars and I, support those businesses. But I think we need to be careful the language that we use in calling out certain particular businesses that are bringing in revenue that the city has approved.
Thank you, Councilmember Andrews. I just want to remind folks that we have just a few more minutes for this area. We have Zermeño followed by Mayor Halliday, and then we're going to wrap up. And I also just want to remind you that we want to stay high level to give the staff the best direction they can on the overall priority list. Go ahead, Councilmember Zermeño.
Just 2 quick points. We do need a diverse economy in our downtown, everywhere else. And as far as cannabis goes, I will certainly vote against any more than 3 cannabis dispensaries in our downtown. I think 3 is enough. Thank you.
Thank you, and Mayor Halliday.
Well, just to add to that, I mean, I did not single out number 6, the cannabis ordinance, as one of my choices. But given what the comments have been, maybe we had a really good work session on that. We got our ideas out on the table that just because, I don't know, 3 people did put that anyway, but I think we should continue on the work to build on. And I think that works both ways, Councilmember Salinas, because some of that could be making a definite statement in that revised ordinance to say we are limiting this to, we are limiting dispensaries to 3, which we're confirming that. So anyway, just to add to that discussion about that particular issue.
Yeah, and let me just make this last comment. And I agree with Councilmember Andrews about the amount of liquor and bars, for example, and I've made those, and I've been on record and talked about that before. And and I think my comments about the medical benefits and the recreational habits of smoking marijuana and cannabis, that's for me, those are non-issues. For me, it's more of a planning of the downtown. And if we didn't have so many bars and liquor, maybe I might come around on this. But I think what we have right now is just in addition to liquor stores and tobacco stores, there's like 146 of them out there, right? And so it's a lot of what we're dealing with today. We're dealing with the sort of the legacy of non-decision making or no decision making on this issue. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you. And Mayor Halliday, did you have a final comment, or was your hand just still up?
If when we're, first of all, are we talking about the downtown or all over the city? But I think, the downtown plan, wasn't that on here, or it's maybe somewhere else? Anyway, that, it clearly we need to have more discussion on that issue, especially around the downtown. So
yeah, I think this is a good thing to flag for the next discussion session. We do need to move on to the next item. I did see Councilmember Wahab raise a hand. Can we do a quick comment and then we'll move on?
Comment/question. I know that we reviewed the cannabis ordinance. It is, obviously, I think majority of council do believe that it shouldn't all be located in downtown. I have said that myself. There is an opportunity to potentially expand that to other areas, more industrial areas, so forth. I don't know what the final decision was based on some feedback. I think there's like miscommunication. But if staff can kind of highlight that piece, because our downtown, as I said, we have it too much in that area, and council members could have, spoken up a little bit more as to whether or not they want to expand that particular area. It has been harder for the retail businesses, as was discussed, as well as individuals trying to open up a cannabis dispensary. And obviously we have different opportunities to capitalize on that. I will also say staff has been in full support of potentially a new policy around the revenue generated to free up some of the funds that we have in our debt, and then also invest and reinvest in economic development and other priorities in the city. So cannabis is important because we have said yes to it. The public has said yes to it, and we just have to prioritize what we're doing with it.
And then the cannabis update will come back to the council later this spring. So there'll be more opportunity to make sure that that's clear and the council direction is clear.
Thank you for adding that. And I think with that, we'll wrap up this section unless staff had any clarifying questions. All right, we'll keep moving. So we're going to do 2 more of these before our short lunch break. Moving right on to climate change. After that, we'll be doing infrastructure. Go ahead, Jim, take us away.
Well, I'm going to turn it right over to Eric, who will give the short staff presentation.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to touch on most of these projects in the next couple of slides, but while we're on this one, I just want to point out that the recommendations for delaying a couple of projects, the number 5, working with stop waste to promote a circular economy. This includes regulation and outreach about single-use disposables. And so we're recommending that we postpone this until after our restaurants have a chance to recover from the pandemic. Regarding number 10, the tree preservation ordinance, we had recommended postponing this, but I guess there is some funding available now to work on that project. So we are recommending that we move forward with that project. So next slide, please. So some of the accomplishments from the past year, the first couple projects, one was to ban natural gas in new residential buildings, and then the second one require EV charging infrastructure in new construction. These were both accomplished with the adoption of the REACH code, which was approved by council in March last year. The code requires that all new residential buildings be all electric, and it also requires EV charging facilities in all building types. That's above and beyond what's required by state code. The transition of electricity use and city operations to 100% renewable. This was approved by council in November last year. And so our city municipal facility accounts have been switched over to renewable 100. The adoption of a 2030 greenhouse gas reduction goal. This was approved in June last year. With a goal of reducing emissions 55% by 2030 and an intention to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. The 2019 building and fire codes, those were adopted in November 2019, and staff began enforcing those in January 2020. And then the Shoreline Master Plan, we are currently wrapping up a 2-year effort, and this is it's going to be brought to the City Council on Tuesday next week for adoption. Next slide. So what we have planned for the next year or so is the projects 1C is to explore banning natural gas in non-residential buildings. This could be the adoption of a REACH code, which if it's approved, it would be in late 2020 and then could take effect with the next state code, which takes effect in January 2023. And then the plan for transition of natural gas appliances to electric in city facilities. We're hoping to get that started this summer, depending on funding. We do hope to start off with an audit of several city facilities. Number 4, adoption of a greenhouse gas reduction roadmap. So the first part of this project I mentioned was approved with the goal last year. The actual roadmap will be an update of the climate action plan. We had been thinking of postponing this. However, we have grant funds to update the housing element and some other parts of the general plan. And so we would like to combine the CAP update with other general plan amendments and have that start later this year and wrap up by the end of, by December of 2022. Tree planting has been a challenge this year with limited city crews available, but we do expect to get back on track in the next year. City fleet meeting the 15% goal by fiscal year 23 is going to be a challenge. We've had some reduction in funding for fleet replacement. However, we are currently testing some police vehicles, some hybrid Ford Explorers, and if those are successful, we'll be adding more hybrids to the fleet. And also we're working with East Bay Community Energy. They intend to do a fleet electrification study for us to start later this year. Regarding the Shoreline Master Plan, I mentioned that'll be going to council on Tuesday. The EIR was called out as a separate project. We're recommending that the EIR be basically removed from the list. We intend to do environmental review for each individual project as they come up and as project details are developed and schedule those projects. We can do the environmental review as they come along. So, and that wraps up my comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mayor, did you have your hand up for this section?
No, I think that I just didn't lower it. Sorry.
Okay. Again, we asked you what's your comfortability with the revised project list. Very comfortable to neutral, but definitely skewed towards the very comfortable. And again, are these projects the right ones? The bell curve is in around agree with a little bit of neutral and some strongly agree. Next slide. There we go. So your priorities were to move items 2, 3, and 4 back on track. 2, 3, and 4 were the city's electric use and the GHG plan. And you would like to understand what resources are needed for the GHG roadmap. To delay, 2 people said the tree preservation ordinance, adding new restrictions to restaurants right after COVID, and to analyze alternative rent increase thresholds. And the one suggestion for a drop was to develop ordinance regulating single-use foodware in restaurants. Projects that you suggested, you can read those: increase community outreach, install more EV stations. But again, council basically felt that each of these either reflected back to an existing project or were part of a council work session. And so again, we're going to start with the overall, we're going to go right to dot voting. And again, the next screen will show you the project list. You're going to hate me, but we only will give you 4 votes. 4 votes, please. And as detailed as you can get, if you can give us the 1B, 2C, 3D, all in one line, I and the Civic Maker elves and Mary will put your dots on the screen, and then we can go right into discussion. Go ahead and input your votes into the chat.
And while that's happening, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So there was comment on the previous slide about 1383 being in quality of life. Can somebody speak to that really quickly? At least I think that's what I read. Yeah.
Well, Florida City dumping illegal or
No, it's the third one.
Oh.
Regarding 1383 implementation.
Oh, and grow the economy.
It's no, support quality of life.
Oh, okay. Increasing
So-
food services is under support.
It's
quality.
yeah. So I'm specifically asking about 1883 implementation. Does staff
So,
feel like that's covered under quality of life, or does it need to be addressed here?
Let's take a look and see.
So SB 1383 requires some amount of food rescue and food redistribution. I'm not sure exactly which project it is in that quality of life that
I think
addresses
if I can
that.
clarify, I think that note there was meant to indicate that it could come back as a work, that it may, I think that it could, with your explanation as to what you're more thinking of here, I think it could come back as a work session item to climate change or quality of life.
Fair enough.
Just to
Okay.
clarify,
Go ahead. Sorry,
council
Jen.
work session. It wasn't an individual work session just on that project, but it would give staff a little more time to research what you wanted, and we could bring that back as part of a future work session on the roadmap. But some of those new projects, we needed a little more understanding.
That's totally fair. Okay, I'll try and include a little bit in my 60-second response
I could
later.
also-
Thanks.
Could also add that we're working with Stop Waste on implementation, and we hope to have a draft ordinance this summer that will kind of guide the implementation of that state law.
Okay, I'm not seeing any votes. If you've put them in, maybe there we go. And again, you would help staff if you can get as specific as possible on the specific projects with the A, B, and C's. Okay. Okay, do my colleagues need more time to add the votes?
I'm ready to go.
I'm ready to go too.
Okay, so let's go to the presentation mode so we can see all these. And let's see. I think Councilmember Wahab, you went first last time, so maybe we'll go to Andrews.
Sure. Let's see. I chose 1B. I believe that we already are making a push for EV charging stations to be part of new development. I want to continue to push for that. And if there's opportunity even to see if we can figure out how to get EV charging stations for public use, not just for private development, I think it can bring more eyes to the street and also provide amenities for our residents. I also chose 5A, so we can try to reduce single use and just provide more education. 6, plant more trees. I do feel that trees are important for community character in addition to helping with climate change. And 8, I think we just need to be up to date in our building and fire code to make sure that our facilities are safe.
Excellent. Thank you. How about Councilmember Salinas?
Yeah, just I'm just more so looking at my list as I look at everyone else, and 5B. I know we already have an ordinance around that, around like styrofoam and stuff like that. So I guess I would probably move that to maybe 2. I mean, you don't have to do it right now, but I'm just kind of thinking out loud. And then, and then number 4, I don't even think I put anything on number 4. Like, I would probably take my 5B and put it to 4 around adopt and implement a greenhouse gases goal and roadmap. And, really focus on that, because I know that's something that we have been committed to. And yeah, I agree with Councilmember Andrews around, bringing the EV charging infrastructure to more public spaces. I think absolutely. I'm seeing more and more electric cars out there, which is great. And I think that's it. And the complete the EIR for the shoreline master plan. I put that there, even though I heard Eric talk about it. It's gonna, so I would probably move that up. Because to trees, I'm pro tree. So thank you. That's it.
You bet. Mayor, would you like to go next? If you're speaking, we can't hear you. Okay. We'll come back to the.
I had originally put, just 1, because reduced dependency on fossil fuels, and you've got a bunch of things, you've got these specific things under it. I switched it to 11B because that is something we're really looking at and pushing. But, it does seem to also relate to numbers 2 and 3 and 4. So, I mean, just in general, I think, meeting our goals that we've set in our climate action plan should be really the goal here, and we should continue working on that. I mean, obviously 7, I think I had that too, and then I think the shoreline master plan. I understand that that's been removed as complete the EIR for the whole thing, but that is something we need to keep our attention on. There are regional efforts. I haven't even had a chance to discuss with staff a focus group I was part of recently for Bay Adapt, but I think we really need to keep that in our sights as something we're continuing to work on. And then number 5, absolutely all of it. We need to work on our waste problems, and through, I think our contract with waste management is coming up, so that should continue to be a focus. So those were my reasons. And on trees, I switched from 6 to 10 at the last minute. Everybody else has 6. I'll go with that. But I think the tree preservation ordinance is important too, to keep the trees we have.
Great. Councilmember Wahab, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Number one, I want to say that I don't believe all my points were counted for dots. Number 8 is also something I suggested. And now I personally think that, again, trying to focus on the policy thing, that's I'd like to plant 1,000 trees annually, but I'd also like to focus on some of the infrastructure that we're going to need in the future. So planning out 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line. So the EV charging stations and so forth are great. I also think we need to take a look at the greenhouse gas goal and roadmap that I feel like we haven't put as much energy into. And then obviously the shoreline is next week. That's why I didn't really pick it. Because again, it's already in place. And then instead of the transition from 15%, obviously I just like us to transition every operation we have 100%. That I think is very doable. We don't have to deal with third-party resources or anything like that in that sense. So or stakeholders. So I think that can be easily a priority that we promote and pursue.
Great, thank you. I see I have gone like out of order from our agreed. My apologies for that. So I'll just continue to call on people to finish. How about Councilmember Zermino?
Okay, thank you. I want to thank staff, or I thank staff for including this particular priority. Is tremendous. It's being green. And for some of these things, there are funds available through Measure D funding that comes from stopwaste.org. Let's see. I want to make sure that we explore the monthly dumping site. That's not on here, but that's something that I still want to do. My apologies to staff for choosing all of number 1 and all of number 5 and not being specific. And that's because I trust staff to prioritize themselves as per funds availability or staff availability. So whatever they come up with, I am fine with that. I just found on trees, very important. I just found a spot on Hesperian Boulevard, which is treeless, and there's space for 6 trees. So Eric, let me know if you're ready for that. And then my 5th dot would go to number 10, update tree preservation ordinance. And again, I'm brown on the outside, but green on the inside. Thank you.
Councilmember Lambden.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to echo the great work and appreciation to our staff. Thank you so much. And I want to highlight just a couple of things. So number 2, in working with EBCE, I'm also thinking about the tremendous amount of advocacy that's going to be needed regarding PG&E and really having the financial and regulatory support to make that really work and get us to the carbon-free energy that we want. And then in terms of the circular economy, I concur with the mayor about really focusing on waste stream. And I don't think that the single-use component is the place we start. The 1383 requirements regarding eliminating organics from our waste stream seems like a great opportunity. And I know our staff is working closely with Stop Waste, and Stop Waste is leading some great efforts around that. And I just want that work to continue and to expand. And I also want to raise Francisco's point, Councilmember Zermenio's point about the monthly dumping site, that if what we had was mechanisms for upstream reuse of products, much like food recovery is an upstream way to get food organics out of the waste stream, the idea of having a place to facilitate reuse might be a way to get at that. And then lastly, I'll echo the comments about obviously we need to keep a focus on the shoreline. So that, yeah, thank you.
Great. And then Council Member Marquez.
Thank you. This discussion is very helpful because it's kind of shifted my thinking. So I concur with the comments with regard to the mayor making about keeping an eye on the shoreline master plan and identifying regional opportunities to partner, as well as securing funding to actually implement the different projects. That's going to be key. We have to closely monitor that, as well as the comments made by Councilmember Lamnin with regard to East Bay Clean Energy, policy issues, the nuclear issue. Those two, I think, need to remain front and center. And I put in the chat box, I wanted to make an update, and I'm going to further complicate it and make another one. So I will take away my 1C and I'd like to move that to 4. And with regard to the trees, just to remind everyone, that's not fully the city's responsibility to do the 1,000. We wanted to partner with East Bay, HUSD, and Chabot, so that collectively as a community, we're meeting that $1,000 mark. Also want to thank staff for their amazing work. Eric, Alex, everyone in that team is just phenomenal, and acknowledge former Councilmember Mendel for leading us in a lot of these efforts. So I will end on that note. Thank you.
Fabulous. We have about 5 minutes for general discussion. And again, feel free to jump in if you would like to respond to your colleagues' comments.
I'll just say, I think that the staff has actually worked incredibly hard on this. I think that overall the council, this is, we're all spread out here. I see that on the little dots and stuff like that. But I think all of us really, really want to enforce and promote being a little bit more environmentally friendly, and hopefully in the future also infrastructure, because we know it's not there yet. For example, charging stations, as much as we want electric cars and so forth, we don't have it there. So this is actually one point that I think that the city does incredibly well with.
Great.
Yeah, and I also wanted to just echo the comment that Councilmember Zermeño made about, really sort of trusting staff and their decision making to move priorities up and down, according to resources and staff. And I think since I've been on the council, I have seen some really effective work in this area over time. And and so I'm confident in staff in their work on this. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Great, thank you. Mayor Holliday, and then Council Member Zermeño.
I just want to point out that in all of these areas, but I think especially this one, we need to always be cognizant of our partners and the organizations that we're actually a part of. And in this one, we've got East Bay Community Energy, we've got Stop Waste, we've got HASPA, and other bigger regional agencies on the shoreline on responding to sea level rise. So we need to also be aware of and ready to take advantage of funding opportunities that come our way from outside sources. So I think that's a consideration I just like to put out there. And I know staff is always considering those things too, because they're aware of what's going on in these other areas and the funding opportunities. But I think we all ought to agree that, we need to be somewhat flexible in taking advantage of some of those things, or working with our partners when we need to. And, sometimes it's usually just one of us that is on, say, Stop Waste. That's Councilmember Lamnin right now. Is that, no, Zermeño. Sorry, Zermeño. And yeah, okay. Anyway, one of us is on. Yeah, I know Councilmember Marquez is East Bay Community Energy. We're all out there. Maybe what I'm saying too is that, and I think I'm one of the maybe ones that doesn't do this enough, but I think all of us, we need to do a better job of reporting back on what's going on in some of these other organizations, so that we're all aware, not just the ones who are representing us.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Zermeño.
Just a couple of words about inviting residents to dump at a certain location. Waste management contracts coming up. Maybe we can deal with them and say, lend us a dumpster on a monthly basis and invite people to take their material to this dumpster that hopefully can be placed somewhere out of the way. I'm thinking, near our maintenance yard, and see if it works out. We see dumping all over the place, and that is just not right. So hoping that we can agree on making it as easy as possible for people to get rid of their material by simply driving it over to a certain place, putting it in a dumpster. So those are my 2 bits about this particular program. Thanks.
Thank you. Any final comments on this particular priority? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the 4th, which is to improve infrastructure. And I will turn it over. Christelis is going to turn it over to a staff member who I believe is Alex, who is making the presentation.
Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. I can start and then turn it over to Kathy Garcia, who is our Deputy Director of Public Works. Just want to mention that, as you can see, infrastructure priority covers a diverse list of projects. Under transportation here, we have multimodal projects, we have pavement work, sidewalk work, traffic calming, and we also have EV charging, both for public use and also city employees' use. If you move to next slide, I can cover other areas. Under facilities, we have some building projects. Under utilities, we have water infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure, and stormwater. And under technology, we have broadband. Many of these projects that you see are on schedule and moving forward. There are some of them that have been not delayed, but the time has been extended. For instance, under replacing water lines or sewer lines, we used to have 4 miles. We changed it to 3 miles based on comments from staff and based on our own financial capacities and also staff capacities. With that, I'm just going to turn it over to Kathy Garcia to make the detailed presentation. Kathy, you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So for the successes and achievements for the multimodal transportation, completed the Hayward Boulevard feasibility study, maintained and improved pavement index at 70, usually achieved with our annual pavement project, prepared OHA pavement improvement project design and financing structure. 2 of the streets from the OHA area are going to be included in our annual pavement project, which will begin this spring. Completed construction of Mission Boulevard Phase 2, explored funding for Mission Boulevard Phase 2 in Linear Park, which will also be constructed later in the year. Completed design of Mission Boulevard Phase 3, which will also be begin construction this season. Assess safe routes for schools for seniors in the downtown area. Next slide, please. And for city and building facilities, conducted initial site and cost analysis for a new police building, designed and constructed some capital improvements to airport hangars. Next slide, please. For water supply, sanitation, storm sewers, implemented advanced metering infrastructure for water system, initiated development of AMI customer portal, completed recycled water system treatment, storage, pumping, and distribution system Phase 1, initiated the design of a large water and sewer main replacement project, implemented a 600 kV portion of Phase 2 of solar PV and utilized the energy within the existing RES-BCT tariff. Next slide, please. Considerations for the upcoming year for multimodal transportation: begin implementation of safe routes for seniors in the downtown area, develop traffic impact fee and present to council. Next slide, please. For city and building facilities, complete construction of Library and Heritage Plaza, rehabilitate airport pavement in phases, continue to design and construct capital improvements to airport hangars, prepare a facility master development plan for SkyWest property. Next slide, please. And for water supply, sanitation, storm sewer, complete construction of improvement projects currently underway at water pollution control facility, begin design of major treatment facility upgrades at WPCF, begin design of major electrical upgrades at WPCF, and install additional trash capture devices in stormwater ways. Next slide.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. And I'll just recap the survey, what we heard from the survey here. So again, we asked what was your level of comfort with the draft revised project list. We heard that many of you are either very comfortable or comfortable. Some of you are neutral, and there was at least one strongly uncomfortable. So I'd be curious to dive into that when we get there. And then in terms of whether or not the project listed are the right ones to help us achieve this priority, we have, again, the bell curve kind of centering on that we agree with that, some strongly agreeing, some neutral, and then at least one disagreeing. Moving on, we have your priorities that you shared in the survey. So finishing the library and the library plaza as being a priority in this year. The courtyard being decoupled from the police station. 2 of you said that, and then the courtyard should not be delayed. So it sounds like wanting to move the courtyard forward and decoupling that from the police station to do so. Would like to understand delays for recycled water pipeline replacement and WPCF projects. I think we may have just covered that. Then in terms of what should be delayed, evaluation of the new police department headquarters. 3 of you said that that should be delayed. 2 of you suggested developing micromobility policy. Then all roads, capital projects, EMAS system for the airport, and solar photovoltaic phase 2B. And no one suggested dropping anything. There's our theme. So moving on to the projects that were suggested to add, we had evaluate new speed control measures. Again, staff has done our best to correlate these to what we think is already being done in the plan, but definitely let us know if you think there's something missing when we get to discussion. Infrastructure improvements on A Street, rehabilitation of the Stratford Stormwater Pump Station. So we talked about that being underway. And then the public safety response call center infrastructure, and that's being flagged for the upcoming council work session that will focus on this topic area. Okay, and then now we're going to get back to our exciting dot voting. So now you get 12 votes from 4 to 12. This may take a while. We might need that whole music, Jim. So we'll just have you take a minute. We actually have 2 slides worth of projects here. So this is going to complicate things even further. We will put, so yeah, Mary's toggling here between the 2 projects. So why don't we, if you're able to pull up the handout that you have as a reference point, if you want to see the full list together, that's an option. But we will keep it on this transportation slide for a while. You can enter your dots for transportation either separately, or we can sort of hold this for a while. You can write down the ones that you want to vote on. Then we can show the next slide, and then you can provide your full list in the chat box. So I think the suggestion might be the easiest to have you kind of note down the items that you choose for transportation while you look at this slide, and then we can move on to the next slide and you can put them all in the chat at once. And Mayor Halliday, you have a hand up. Did you have a question now, or was that from before? Okay, just wanted to make sure.
I have a general question for Alex. May I ask?
Yes.
Alex,
Yeah,
one of them says add 2 miles of sidewalks per year. We don't have any streets without sidewalks. Our whole city has sidewalks, correct?
Well, we have certain areas that either we don't have sidewalk or sidewalk sections of sidewalks are missing. and
Just
we are
last week,
adding
Beaumont
sidewalks.
doesn't have sidewalks.
I guess I haven't walked those areas. I thought I had walked all of Hayward. The only non-sidewalks are in Alameda County, but
And
okay.
an example would be Walpert. If you recall, we did a project recently to complete the sidewalk on Walpert.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, what do we think? Can we show the second slide?
I know we all have received this presentation in our email. We can always just open this up on our screens too.
Right, you can do that too. Right, so as soon
Okay,
as
I'll
you're
go to
ready,
the second slide, and then if anyone needs me to go back, please yell out.
as soon as you're ready, go ahead and put in your 12 votes in the chat box, and we will get them recorded.
But you need to give us a little more time on this one because there are a whole lot, and we've had a discussion. So let's not push the time. I don't know. You can tell me how people are doing, but I
think we're
No problem, Mayor. We'll slow down a little bit. 12 dots is a lot.
There's a piercing sound.
It's like a whistling sound. I don't know where it's coming from. I hear it too. Oh.
I'll try and put everyone on mute.
And just to keep us on time, if you could submit your votes as early as possible, that'll keep the our agenda on track.
I'm going to unshare my screen for a moment and restart this because it looks like our dots are not popping up. Jim or Christelle, if either of you are done, if you could do Zermania's dots, I'm working on getting my screen shared again. I'm not able to get
Oh yeah,
to
no
it.
problem. Thank you for bearing with us, everyone.
Mary, which one did you need help with?
I think that Christelle's doing, but Zermania's votes.
Jim, could you do the second slide for Zermania?
Sure.
You need me to do anything?
No, it wasn't you. You just were the last for me to get to, and I am working on trying to get the screen back up. So. We're testing the limits of our SharePoint shared documents right now.
I think that was item 19C, right? Improve bandwidth.
There we go. Okay, I'm good.
Okay,
Jim?
I'm gonna reshare.
Jim, did you get through?
I think I'm
slide
good.
2?
Yeah.
Okay, and I got, and they're showing up now, so I will go.
Thank you for your patience.
There we go.
Yes, thank you, everyone. All right, we're back in action. Wonderful. Okay, so we started last time with Councilmember Andrews, so I think we'll start this time with Councilmember Lamnon, and we'll just rotate through the order at the bottom there. Go ahead.
Okay, so overall, again, great work throughout the year. Thank you so much. And my sort of overall feedback here is kind of stay the course, but I'm interested in, what I don't know that I have an entire grasp of is what are some of the trade-off questions? Things like keeping our sewer and water up and running, keeping a lot of this is initiatives that we've wanted to see in the city for a long time, and so I'm loath to pull back on them. But if there are ones where there are policy questions about, well, we can only do one of these 3 things, pick one. And maybe that is the exercise of today, but it was a little tricky. I mean, I wasn't entirely sure if I knew all of that answer. So I did my best to provide that feedback. But if there are more granular questions about that, I certainly welcome that discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Lamnon, and we'll move on to Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you again. Staff has done a phenomenal job. This for me, honestly, was a bit overwhelming. It's a lot of content to prioritize. But one of the things that stood out the most to me is I think we really need to maximize opportunity on item number 3, develop and submit a traffic impact fee program. As we know, e-commerce is thriving in Hayward. It is having impacts on our city streets, transportation. So really want to time that in a way that we can maximize those dollars. Just overall, everything that I selected, want to see if we could partner. I know staff does an amazing job at securing grant funding. So keeping an eye on funding availability to make these projects actually come into fruition. I will take 4B off since no one else agreed with that one. And I know that I will move the 4B to the Corp Yard discussion. I know that the Corp Yard and our police department are in dire need of basically new buildings. However, we know our financial situation is very tight, but we do need to start analyzing that and figuring out how we can fund those projects. Obviously, we don't have the answers, but we need to start exploring those opportunities now and have a plan to implement that. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to Councilmember Salinas.
Yeah. So yeah, there was a lot of content, and I know I'm on the infrastructure committee, but so I just got 3 big areas. Technology. Get the fiber. I don't know where we're at on the fiber, but I know we've been working on that for several years now, and so just whatever we can do to keep on course on that, that's great. Transportation. One of the greatest issues that I'm sure all of us get emailed on and talked to is traffic calming, speeding, neighborhood speeding, reckless driving. I know some of that has to do with law enforcement and street patrol and so forth, but also what can we do from a streetscape, landscape vantage point to calm traffic. And I know we've been doing that specifically along the Hayward Boulevard corridor. So stay on course and let's do that. And of course, AC Transit. The more we can get people to take public transportation, especially as we sort of ease out of COVID-19, and hopefully in a positive direction, we can get people back on public transportation. Lastly, facilities. I want we still are committed to public safety. And given our budget constraints and other financial constraints, and also considering the much broader social political context out there around law enforcement, we still must remain committed to public safety, and I think we are. At the same time, I think we can continue to seek funding opportunities to develop and build new facilities. I think this is a great time as we talk about reimagining police work and reimagining community protection services. I think we can also reimagine how we build infrastructure and build a facility that will house that. And I think this is a great opportunity to really move in that direction as we look towards revisioning a lot of this work. So those are the three big areas that I hopefully my dots reflected. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving right on to Councilmember Zermeño.
Thank you very much. And this is quite a list, and I like it because one of the things that it emphasizes is public safety through road improvement, through bicycle safety, pedestrian safety, and that's good. Working with AC Transit, working with BART, working with ACTC, tremendous. I'm glad that that's happening. My 13th thought would have been a feasibility study on the corporate yard separate from the police building. And we know the police, at least I have heard, $100 million. I don't think that a corporate yard would have that kind of a price tag. Missing on the list is the solar paneling of our municipal parking lots. I think that's something that we ought to do to have more solar energy and to protect our cars, so the customers. Kudos to Alex for making sure that the 360 plus miles of streets in our city are in good shape and refurbished whenever they need to be. And also missing is the customs possibility at our airport, so that we could then have international flights coming in into Hayward. So that's something that I think we want to pursue. We discussed a little bit at the airport, and I really don't want to lose it, but it's not here. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Right on time. And moving on to Mayor Halliday.
Okay. Of all of these, number 2, traffic calming is way high on my list, and I just said all of them. We need to continue that effort. Maybe this was a big chunk of things to handle, and probably should have been divided into transportation and then the other 3. But on the BART TOD. I think we have to continue trying to work with them, especially on the South Hayward BART station, because, I think time may be ripe to really get that plan completed, and we had a plan. I think 4B, what's 4B? Sorry. Anyway, recycled water is very important, and I want to keep that project going. Absolutely echo. I think it's Councilmember Salinas is ahead of me. He doesn't know where we are on the fiber. I'm not sure I know what it is exactly, but no, other than what they make clothes out of, but broadband in general, that whole area, I think this pandemic and the especially in the schools sheltering in place and schools being closed, it is really highlighted. First of all, a disparity. Even with council members, I know sometimes people have to keep their cameras off because they don't, their internet. Honestly, this isn't an area I understand, but we need to improve it because clearly we're all going to be trying to use these things more and more. And it really showed up in terms of trying to get our kids educated during this time. I wanted to ask where the library is not on this list, and really getting it completed, which it isn't fully, my understanding, inside yet. And getting that plaza open should be up there at the top. People are really starting to, notice how long it's taken. I would agree the police department headquarters itself can be postponed. I mean, I'm not saying we should never look at trying to, but we're in a study right now of reimagining policing in some ways and partnering. And I think that for right now, that can be delayed while we do that part of it and then go back to it. And meanwhile, maybe go ahead and look at the courtyard, but and also, and then the airport, I didn't really include anything about the airport, but the airport, does really have its own funding sources and its own staff, although I know that Public Works staff also is involved in the projects. But, I would say, do at the airport what we need to do and what we have funding to do and to make sure that we're safe. Although I didn't put this on, but I think on my list, but 11B, the Sulphur Creek. Well, no, that's not, I'm sorry. That's not it. It's Sky West. Sky West should be on the list, which it isn't, but that is something that we really need to deal with coming up.
Thank you, Mayor. And we'll move on to Councilmember Wahab and a reminder about the 1.5 minutes. Thank you.
Sorry.
No worries. So I put my numbers. I do just want to highlight a couple things. I personally think that water, sewage, infrastructure, considering that I consider this more of an infrastructure design, is priority for me. I want people to have access to good, clean water. I know I've complained about in my building, the water is incredibly hard. We know that the city invests in the infrastructure, but I do not see that in regards to some of these older buildings. And, that has always been a concern of mine. Many neighbors have also complained throughout the city about their sewage and their just their pipes, basically. So I just want to see how we look at policy around that. That is incredibly important. We don't want another, we see it in the news where some people don't have clean drinking water. And then in regards to infrastructure, I just want to highlight that I see it as an investment in our overall city infrastructure. So I do highlight, just our buildings being, whether it's renovated, whether it's rehabbed, whether it's anything, we do live on a fault zone and an earthquake zone. To many of our employees, I personally am dedicated to ensuring that it is a safe and stable building for you all, that you guys have what you need, that asbestos is actually taken a look at, some of these mold, things like that. These buildings are old and they deserve to be either completely rebuilt or, reinvested in. I do highlight fiber as much as possible, and the reason for that, and I would like for our city manager to take a look at this. I know we've been working on fiber and inviting companies that could provide lower cost services to the public, but it is incredibly important to invite 21st century businesses into the city. And the only way they can do that is if they have high-speed internet, and that is something that I think that is a priority just for economic development. Or, as our mayor alluded to, the disparity between people that can afford, the Comcast that's over $100 versus the, the cheaper internet that we can potentially provide and partner with a company. We are currently talking to 2 different companies and hopefully more, and hopefully we can kind of take care of that. So I just want to highlight that. Those are my priorities. Again, health and safety first, and then obviously whatever we can do to invite and attract interest in the city of Hayward. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll wrap up with Councilmember Andrews.
Well, working in wastewater, I'm very happy to hear Councilmember Wahab talk about the importance of water infrastructure. And I wish I can put dots on all of these projects, but I really do care about the pipes as well, water and sewer. It's important that we address I&I that contributes to our treatment at the facilities. So if we can focus on pipes, I know that, I'm trying to do that in my daily work. So I do feel like that would help with some of the recycled water aspects that we're trying to do at the plant. So just want to say that. And then I do want to focus also on fiber. This pandemic has highlighted the inequities of access to having internet, and we need to, if I can mark all of them, I would. So if we can do anything to help with getting more fiber, that is very important. Anything to do trash reduction, I'm for, and definitely working in the courtyard myself. I know that it is an outdated facility, and we definitely need to start the needs assessment for that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so we have a couple minutes remaining for any discussion. And then we're gonna break for our 20-minute lunch, which we now caught up with our schedule because we're scheduled to break at 12:25 for lunch. Any final comments on this? Go ahead, Councilmember Marquez.
I would just ask that when this comes back to us in the spring, I think we're going to have another work session, that maybe we start with this infrastructure component and allocate ample time. I just feel like it's a lot of information to go through. So if we could please do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Request noted. Anyone else?
I just want my stars in the areas that I've actually specifically targeted them. So just, I know it's a bit much, but no worries now, but I just in the future, when we finalize this, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bearing with us on this. I know it's a little clunkier than the process we had originally designed. So we will make sure that they are properly attributed. All right, thank you all. Looks like everyone's ready for a lunch break. So let's go, and we will be back at 12:45.
Christelle, one more comment, which is in the next section, it's another biggie like this. Organizational health has about 50 projects, of which we're going to ask you to do 12 votes again. So over lunch, look at your handouts, look at the PowerPoint, and maybe start thinking about what projects you want to include in your 12. And if you,
I'm just wondering, could you put the slide up so that maybe people have maybe moved to the slide for the organizational health, so folks want to do that while they're.
Yeah, there's two, so we can put up one.
We at least put one up, and then maybe.
Well, we all have it, so.
Yeah, we have PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And if you get confused about what you think you should do, always remember that's why we did the vision. The vision should be that anchoring component about what's going to help you achieve that vision.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to go to your own slide on the on this because it's.
Okay, I was trying to help, but I think if I was to go to PowerPoint, it's probably better. Yeah.
Go to the email.
Okay, thank you everyone. Enjoy your lunch. We'll see you at 12:45.
Okay.